Hello everybody, welcome to Frame Trap. Today I am joined by Brandon Jones.
Hello.
And Daniel Bloodworth.
Yo.
I am your host, Ben Moore. Thinking about this episode of Frame Trap, I was like, man, we're almost at the end of the year. That's crazy. It's going to be a really busy and exciting end of the year with Next Gen. Pretty much right on top of us. But I was thinking about it and I was like, hey, I wonder, are there any games that you guys haven't gotten to this year that you really wish you would have? Not meant to like shame you or anything.
Seriously asking that question.
Yeah. I was just curious if, I don't know. If you could pick one.
Dreams.
Dreams?
Man. A game I just,
The game you reviewed? Okay, yeah.
Just vacationed for the rest of the year. I was like, extremely in and was like, this is fantastic, and full knowing like I'm not going to have time to check in on this or jump in once a week. And I'll check out, I'll basically do what I did at launch where I had previously taken a break from when it first launched in early access, where it's like, I'll just make 2 days of it and I'll just run into 150 levels as quick as I can and just kind of get a big gulp of like, that's what's going on. But it's been wild seeing social updates and that guy who made that forest that was crazy, that it was just kind of this like crazy photorealistic thing that you look at on social media. If you shrink it down, it's like, wow, that looks real. And then I blow it up and it's like, no, that's dreams. I know those leaves. But it's just such a fascinating game, and kind of like Animal Crossing, like such a weird, obvious take for GOTY, but not at the same time. Like there's a lot of varied projects this year going into the end of the year analysis.
It's something that's, I think, kind of a blessing and a curse with how games are released now, because I got really into Destiny over the summer and I've been away from it for a couple of months now. And it's like, I put a lot of time into kind of trying to learn that game and starting to learn that game. And now I've lost all of it. Like, it's just gone. And it's probably changed since I last jumped into it. But Blood, how about you?
Well, yeah, like I said, there's a lot of things I could choose from.
Hey,
but
that's okay.
I think I'll go with Ghost of Tsushima, because
that was my other one.
Yeah, when we got those review codes in, I installed that game. I've not even so much as like clicked the button to load up that title screen. So
Hey, maybe it'll be like Death Stranding for you, because I don't think you got to Death Stranding until the holiday break, but you put in like 5,000 hours?
Yeah, it was pretty. I was expecting to just like, I'll get over Death Stranding in like this weekend, and then I'll play the next thing, and like, the whole Christmas break was just Death Stranding.
I think the one that came to mind for me, I feel like I've played a lot of the stuff that's come out this year, but Hunt Down. I know I'm gonna love Hunt Down, and I'll probably just like fly through it, but just the way that Don and Hubert talk about it, it's like been floating around somewhere in my mind, and I just haven't committed to it yet. But
I was on that stream team, and like the thing that's so great about Hunt Down is because you can bounce back and forth between, I'm just going to run around and cause a ruckus, or like, no, I'm really tactically going to try to do well. It's like, you can do both. Doesn't matter. Like obviously some of the boss fights are like pretty brutal. You really got to get, like Mega Man, you got to get used to that sequencing and, the patterns.
Yeah.
But
hey, I love that kind of game.
It's a fun game to RP your way through and like really get into character, but it's also a fun game just to kind of goof around in.
Nice.
You can do both of those simultaneously. The co-op we did via the Parsec, and it worked.
Did that
really
work really well? Okay. I think I've only used Parsec like once, but yeah. Doing co-op.
Yeah, I haven't used it with any Easy Allies stuff, I don't think. So I haven't seen it under like normal conditions. I've just done it with some preview events, and then they're like, their tech guys are like, turn this off and turn these settings on, and they're like, okay, I hope whenever I use this again, it will actually function the right way.
Do it with friends. I wouldn't recommend, parsecing up with a stranger, but
no, not at all, because like you're literally taking control of their PC, so or giving them your PC to control.
This is kind of relevant to what we were talking about, but just like catching up on games that you miss. And I feel like, as people who cover games, we have that pressure on us, rightfully so. But sometimes you just weirdly fall into random game holes. Like, I feel like I've been playing Dead by Daylight for like no great reason this whole week. And I've just been having a blast. And it's like, probably could have played Hunt Down in that time, but I don't know. I think sometimes it's good to let your curiosity get the better of you. Not all the time, but sometimes.
Yeah, well, when we were prepping for Hunting Huber, I did kind of the same thing. I was like, I want to, get to know this game a little bit. And I'm like, I'm digging this. So, I kept playing and leveling up and really got my character in a good spot to just annihilate Huber when the time came.
Dude, that was a blood cut at the top of this podcast. You were playing Killer? You were hunting Huber?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just curious what Killer...
I was playing the shock guy, the doctor.
Yeah, because you played the doctor when we did the stream. I played a little bit of him today on stream. I'm not very good with him, but he seems cool. Brandon, let's get into it. You watched all of, I believe, The Haunting of Bly Manor, and I was a big fan of Haunting of Hill House, but I haven't watched Bly Manor yet. You said, and I quote, that you had a hot take.
Sure. Well, we debated doing a spoiler mode on it, and we weren't sure if we were going to have time. I didn't really have time to gobble it up right away. I finished it much later than friends, but I watched it with Amanda, and we were thinking maybe like sharing a mic and doing our own like spoiler mode. But we were like, I don't want to dump on it because Huber brought up a really excellent point. Huber has endured some loss in his family recently, and I had a lot of criticisms for the season, and then I would talk to Huber, and he said that resonated with me more than most television I've watched recently, and I just all of a sudden had a completely different take on the whole season. I was like, oh, that's an excellent point. And what they've done, Mike Flanagan, I think, is the director, the guy who did both of these seasons. There's so many interesting things that's going on, and there were some really great performances and just the general craft of the whole thing. Like I really appreciate. I used to really be into the American Horror Story. I really liked the first 2 seasons, and then season 3 started to kind of go off the rails a little bit. And then by 4, I was like, this is just Looney Tunes. I'm out. It's just not. It's spooky, but it's so weird and over the top and sensational. And then it's Hill House came along, and I'm like, here we go. Old creaky wood, like basements and attics, and like lace blowing in the wind. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is Haunted Mansion style. This is more my vibe, and I think it's such a fun modern take. But the first season was a lot about mental health. I think there was a lot about perception and kind of struggling with, did I see that? What am I going through personally? And this one was very much about loss. And I didn't really grasp onto that because I was super critical of their British accents and all sorts of weird things comparing it to the first season. Whereas Huber was it just immediately hit, and he was drawing all these connections. So it was neat through his eyes to look back on the season and be like, totally, they really wrestled with some cool stuff. I just thought some of the story beats were weird, but we can get into that.
When I watched Hill House, I feel like I really didn't know much about it going in, and I just became obsessed with it. I burned through that show as fast as I could. And I got so attached to the characters. I know that some of the actors from Hill House are in Bly Manor as different characters.
That's totally different thing.
Yeah, is that weird at all?
Sure.
Well, just for you.
It's not universally weird. You've heard me gripe about that stuff, Ben. That's just extremely strange to me. Also because one guy strides in with a British accent now, and you're like, oh, another guy's Scottish, and actually has a pretty damn good Scottish accent. But good guys play bad guys, and so there is a little bit of that flop. That actually is also similar to American Horror Story. They hung on to the cast, and they're all great performers. It was a little distracting. There's one episode later on where another actor shows up, and it's like, it's hard for me. It's like the meme with Leonardo DiCaprio from Hollywood where he's like, hey, and he's pointing, I'm just like, oh, it's that person. And it's like, well, I don't want to be thinking that. I want to be into the story. I want to be, who's this woman? Instead of like, oh yeah, what's her name? So that's not really just kind of the headspace of where I want to be. But I'm also sympathetic to writers, directors that are like, I had a lot of fun working with those people. I want to work with them again. They're really talented, and they're committed to this project. I already got them going. That's why Scorsese says he works with De Niro again and again. He's like, I don't have to worry about him. We can show up, we can get right to work. But the accents was a little interesting. I've seen people on social media talking to people from the UK being like, how'd you take that? And they're like, they work great, but it can be a stretch sometimes, to believe that stuff. But the setting was good. It also wasn't as scary as season 1. Season 1 rocked me.
Had some really good moments.
Woohoo! Really crawl. really crawled up my spine in a couple instances, even just kind of thinking about it, kind of like where Poltergeist and like The Ring sit for me, you know, these movies that really impacted me, you know, even just thinking about it in passing is like, ugh, you know, I know it's not real, and I wouldn't gasp if I saw it again, but just that concept. Whereas this was very heavy with emotion, you know, it was very soap opera-y too. There are lots of subterfuge and twists and backstabbing and stuff, and so it was like little more drama than less scares. But IGN did a thing on the ghosts that are in the background. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you saw. Do you see Hill House Blood?
No.
So one thing that they did that I wish
kind
more
of a little bit, yeah.
I wish more horror did, because one of the things that I hate when modern horror does, when something like creeps by in the background and the soundtrack's like, someone's in the background, and I'm like, I can see someone's in the background. Stop. Right. You know, like, you don't need to call attention to everything. Surprise me. And there's a lot of, you really gotta, you know, it's like, Where's Waldo? You really gotta keep your eyes peeled. And I clicked on the IGN article. It's like, I might have missed some, and like I missed like 50. Like there were just so many. There's like an arm or like a head popping up through a window, or there's just a constant presence of all of
in Hill House or Bly Manor?
Different characters. In both.
Oh, okay.
Specifically, Bly Manor was the article I looked up and was like, whoa. So it's like, you know, I don't recommend pausing every frame, you know, like a highlights magazine, but it's just a fun. They're having a good time, you know. Like, this is a crew, and it's very much, if you liked Hill House and you're in the mood in this season for that kind of vibe, like, totally delivers. I just it was one of those things where Amanda and I kind of looked at each other when we were done. We were like, that was odd. Just some character choices, some stuff kind of just was left out there, and like I said, just a bit more drama, less scare.
I think I have this weird mental barrier with this, where I liked Hill House so much that I think I'm a little bit nervous about watching Bly Manor, because I feel like I'm just going to be constantly comparing the two. Mm-hmm. And Hill House hit such a high bar for me that I'm like, oh, like I feel like if it isn't as good, it's going to extra disappoint me, just because I was so invested in Hill House. And I don't know, that kind of like turns me off from watching it, but at the same time, you mentioned the vibe, and if you like that vibe, you should definitely give this a chance. And and I do. I love the style of Hill House, but I've heard Huber's probably the only one that I've seen take from where he's like, oh, I liked it a lot. I loved it. I've kind of gotten a general sense that people don't think it's quite as good, and I think that's kind of made me hesitant. But,
well, it's again, just going from the scare into more of like a drama focus is kind of a dip, just in terms of expectations. It's kind of like it was 9 episodes instead of 10 as well. It's also a shorter cast. Season 1 bounced around to a lot of like 10 years ago, 2 years ago. You know, like, you need to understand all of these different story things that have happened. You had all the members of the family plus their families, where it's really just like 7 people, like the whole thing. You know, it's really just focusing on a very specific, focused family tale, which, like, there are characters in season 2 that I love way more than a lot of people in season 1, where I'm just like, I love this person, I care about them, I don't want anything bad to happen to them. There's these 2 kids that are the center of it, where horror with kids is rough. If you have a kid who just can't pull it off, if you have like a Jake Lloyd in episode 1, it's like, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing we can do, I can't pretend to like this kid, you know. And they're exceptional, you know, they're wise beyond their years. Which is always really great. Like, the kid in The Ring was really good. The kid in the Babadook is really good. And it's just like, it's a make or break for me, like, if that's going to sell it. And Henry Thomas, who is in E.T., you know, he comes back. Everyone's just, and Jared, just some really standout performances. But being careful, try not to talk about too much.
You mentioned that it's less scary, which I think is totally fine. I don't even think that that's necessarily this huge criticism, but it is just a tough time, because right now, in this moment, at the end of October, I want to be scared, right? Like, I specifically want to watch things that are going to be spooky or especially that. And I'm sure that's in there to some degree, but hearing it's less scary, it's just like, maybe not what I want right this second.
At the same time, what I think happened to American Horror Story is it just tried to constantly outshock itself, you know, and so that's when I just got disinterested, because I was like, why? This doesn't make any sense. And So I'm fine with them taking a different route, in terms of what they're going to do with the story. Because for people that don't know, Hill House was based on The Haunting, I think is the original story. If you go see the Liam Neeson movie, which is on like Amazon or something or on HBO, it's based on that. So they took these existing characters and were like, how can I connect this across a series, across 10 episodes? And they did the same thing with Bly Manor based on Henry James's Turn of the Screw. And so it's like much more, where Turn of the Screw is like, this all pair went to this house and spooky things happened. And this show's like, no, let's get into this. Like what, like really, why are these things happening? Where did this ghost come from? What are the stories behind it? How is it affecting everybody? And so from a literary standpoint, it's just kind of fun to deconstruct that way. So like, I hope this goes on and on and on forever. I hope they get like 6 more seasons, because even if we get like, oh, that's not necessarily what I would have done with that book, but that was cool. It was like, that was neat. And I'm super glad, it's like, I could criticize this all day. This is why I'm tempted to do that spoiler mode, but like no regrets for watching it. And most certainly if like we get maybe 2 more seasons and then that's it, I could totally see myself going back and watching all of it again, 10 years from now or something. Cause it's just like, it's rare you get this kind of Guillermo del Toro, slow, deliberate classic horror, that is modern. I think it's like in the 80s, late 80s, 90s, the Bly Manor takes place. But there's just something, it just has a connection to, 19th century, old house lore. The Others with Nicole Kidman, just that kind of vibe. Always there for that.
Not really a great point to bring up, but I just want to say Del Toro is a goddamn genius. Like,
yeah, he's a hard man to criticize. Like, I didn't like what was the Red House? What is it called?
Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak.
Yeah, that was okay. I thought the story was kind of predictable, and I wasn't like, but visually, it's just like, you're a genius. Like, it's just his aesthetic is so good, and Pan's Labyrinth is one of the best movies I've ever seen.
I think Pan's Labyrinth is a masterpiece. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Yeah.
Yeah. Masterpiece and genius are 2 words I really try not to label too many things.
Sure.
Pan's Labyrinth is a masterpiece.
Yeah, I feel like I could say that without hesitation. Brandon, you made me think of a missed opportunity because this was last year, but we both saw the movie Us, and I remember you, because I loved Us, Jordan Peele's Us, and I remember you not liking it as much, and I think that conversation would have been better when it was both fresh in our minds, but I wish we could have talked about that because I don't know what you didn't like about it.
Oh, Ben, I mean, you heard me talk about Terminator 2, man. I'll rip into a movie anytime you want.
Sure.
Anytime anybody wants. I got it. It's like little files. Like, hold on a second. Flip. Here we go. All right, Us. So this part's implausible over here, and
have you seen
a little overacted over here? No,
Midsummer, Brandon?
Yeah.
You have? Did you like it?
More than Us, for sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Midsummer's just...
Yeah, oof. I love Midsummer.
Midsummer's like an enema. Midsummer's just like...
It's a trip.
Did I enjoy that? I guess. Like,
right.
I don't know if I would watch Midsummer again. Oof.
I would, I think. But I totally get where you're coming from. I adore that ending. But anyway, getting a little bit off track here. You mentioned American Horror Story, Brendan, and I do want to touch on this because I've been very interested in American Horror Story, and I feel like I've dabbled in it just a tiny bit. But I run into this problem where I feel like there's so much American Horror Story now that it's like, do I really want to commit to this? People see, like you're saying, like, oh, it just falls off a cliff. And it's like, is it really worth like trying to enjoy and then only to get to like season 3 or 4 and you're like, oh, now suddenly it's garbage? I don't know.
Just watch 1 and 2 and then you're done. And you don't have to worry about story continuation because it's its own thing.
Okay.
3 is The Coven, which is like, okay, like part of it's like really cool. And then it's one of those shows that's just like, now we're just going to party. You're like, all right, where'd the plot go? Like, and then 4 was like the circus. And I was like, no, I'm out. It's like one of those scenes. I just want to say, just because legitimately, this is because I'm such a nerd. Like, this is just the dumb stuff. This woman gets like kidnapped by the circus, and then like the next day she wakes up, and they're like, "We recorded you while you were sleeping," and this is like in the 50s, and so like. So she's like, what? And they like, she's watching video of her the night before, and it's edited, and it's just like, I can't. As an editor, I can't stop imagining. It's like, wait, so you filmed this last night, processed the film, and then spliced it at like 3 a.m. just to spook this girl you kidnapped on a whim yesterday? Click. It's like, I'm out. Like, where it just becomes, which it can be fun. Like, Blood, you just finished Legion, and Legion's like very weird and very silly, very intentionally, goofy, but I get where it's going. Whereas like, when American Horror Story does that and then later it's like, okay, back to being scary. It's like, you're done. I can't, you're not going to get me in that mood again after
sure
you had like 4 clowns do some weird thing, like I don't know.
I know. I don't know. I think Stevie Nicks does a cameo in
3.
Okay,
that's where it gets. Yeah, that's where it gets a little off the rails. But
I'm just a big Stevie Nicks fan, and so good or bad, I kind of want to see it. I kind of want to see it
because she's Stevie Nicks has always been kind of into mysticism, and she sings about it, she talks about it, and so the covens are like, she's one of us. So it's a fun cameo.
But yeah, hey, Blood.
Then you're out. 3 and you're out.
Hey.
Talk to me about Discworld.
Disc Room.
Oh, sorry.
Discworld is something else.
Discworld isn't Discworld a novel series?
Yeah. Shout out.
That was swimming around somewhere in there. Tell me about Disc Room.
All right. Yeah, so Disc Room I popped into last night and this morning. It's being published by Devolver. It's some of the same devs that made Minute.
Neat.
If you check that out.
I didn't. I should have.
Yeah. Not at all like Minute, other than being 2D and kind of top down. But I guess the easiest way that I can kind of condense it to let you understand what it's like is it's like Geometry Wars pacifist mode, but with like levels and objectives and things. So you're essentially, the way the story is set up, and the comic book art style kind of looks sort of like the Far Side as sort of the best comparison I can make for it. And so it's 2089, and this giant disk has been spotted orbiting Jupiter. And so this team of scientists goes, we're going to check out this giant disk. We don't know what it is. And then they get in there, and it's just full of basically saw blades bouncing around. And of course they kill you, but you just keep coming back. And so it has like this Meat Boy thing of you get killed, you push the button, and you're just instantly just back in the same room until you complete your objectives. But what gets kind of crazy with it, so you're trying to progress through this maze, right? So like you kind of look at a map and you see like every room, kind of like a Zelda dungeon, connects to other rooms, and to unlock a specific door, you might have to survive for 10 seconds or 20 seconds, or you might have to destroy something or whatever. But also baked into this is you actually want to get killed a lot, because almost every room has new types of discs in it. There's different designs on them, different behaviors, and things like that. And every time that you get killed by a new type of disc, then there's like a checklist screen that you've gotten that disc, and there's this little tiny like 1 sentence bit of lore associated with that disc.
Question.
Yeah.
Do any UMDs or GameCube discs kill you?
Not yet.
Okay.
But basically most of them are like saw blades. And there are some that are larger and smaller, and some that track you a little bit more. Some that, like, when they hit the edge of the wall, they'll spawn, like, a bunch of smaller ones.
Okay, I'm sorry. Huber's not here, so I feel obligated on his behalf. Top 10 discs. Sorry. Continue.
And then some of the larger ones that have, like, weird, like, body parts and, like, rib cages and stuff in the center. And
awesome.
So just like, yeah, and there's like a lot, obviously, like anytime you get hit, like you're just body parts everywhere. So it is kind of Halloweenish a little bit. And then some of the ones that you get hit by in certain rooms, when you get killed by them, you will absorb an ability from them. And so just by default, all you can do is run around and not get hit. But then you get an ability where, okay, now you have a dash, so you can dash through, and you kind of have like that iframes while you're dashing, so that like you won't be hurt by a disc mid dash. And then there's another one where you sort of slow time, but you have like this meter that condenses. The longer you hold the button, the less, the more you're gonna have to wait for it to recharge. And so you're kind of like slow-mo and kind of weaving through and getting past different discs. And then there's another one that's kind of you clone yourself, kind of, and it kind of works like the duplication cherry in like Mario 3D World.
That was immediately what I thought of.
Yeah, and so you can keep cloning, and I don't know like if there's even a max, But then wherever all of these different clones are, you're controlling them all at the same time. And so it gets a little bit like, it's tricky to work with your brain. Like, okay, which one am I actually keeping my eye on? But as long as you have one body alive, you'll continue to survive. And those are the 3 I've gotten. I think there's another 3 or 4 more abilities I have left to unlock. And then certain rooms will have, I think they called them like gatekeepers or something like that. They're essentially like boss discs that you have to kill by picking up all of these different orbs. And so like you basically have to stay alive, and every time you pick up an orb, then another orb will show up. And so you just pick up the orbs, and every time you pick up an orb, it does damage to the boss disc until you finally kill it, and then unlock the next room. But yeah, so you have to stay alive a certain amount of times, or sometimes you have to get killed by a certain amount of discs. So you have to kill a certain number of discs. And every once in a and then with the bosses, with the orbs, and there's also golden discs in some rooms. But anyway, so every once in a while, like you'll do something that will trigger like a small cutscene, but it's pretty vague. It's just visual. So it's hard to piece together like, okay, what is exactly the story here so far? I'm not sure I get it just yet, but.
You mentioned that the boss-like enemies were gatekeepers, and I just like envisioned them being like, "You're not a real Disc Room fan," like gatekeeping it in a conventional sense. But is it randomly generated?
No, it's not. So it's not really roguelike in that sense. It like each room has a very specific composition of discs in it. That's what I'm saying about like unlocking them. So like you'll see that like there's 3 different types of discs in this room, and you'll see whether you've been killed by all of them or not.
So do you run into like kind of a Castlevania or Contra situation where like you let's say you have the iframe ability that you got. If you die to another type of disc that gives another ability, even if you don't want to, do your abilities get swapped?
No. So basically, like when you die, then like you can just mash that A button and just go right back in, but you can hit B instead and swap your ability.
Cool.
Okay.
And so that's one of the things is, kind of experimenting and figuring out like in one room, because I really, slow-mo has been my go-to, but sometimes some of those discs will spawn out in like a really wide line, and it's like there's no way to get around these things sometimes. So it's better for me to have the dash when I'm facing off against them. But it's just like I said, most rooms have new discs or new elements. Like one had an element where your timer only works while you're in the center. So there's like a circle in the center, and you have to be in that circle for the timer to go up. And again, like you have to survive so many seconds. But if you're outside the circle, your seconds aren't clocking. So a lot of different little things like that to play with.
You mentioned the rooms being stitched together in kind of like a top-down Zelda style. Do you have a map, like a Metroidvania map that you're slowly expanding?
Yeah. So if you go to the map screen, then you can see everything like really simply, because it is just a bunch of squares next to each other. And so you can see, what rooms are locked, what rooms, you've been to, what rooms you haven't gotten all the discs in. And then I think there's even like, if you haven't survived for 20 seconds, it'll be a different color than if you have. So there's a lot of information that's communicated very simply on that map screen, so that you can, if you're up against a wall in one spot, it's like, okay, well, I'll go this direction and go a few rooms over here and see if I can make progress that way.
You mentioned the Super Meat Boy and just like instantly restarting. So do you just instantly restart in the same room that you died in? And is it like Meat Boy where you just like start at the beginning of that room, essentially?
Yeah. So basically every room starts off fairly empty. I would say you'll have like, 1 or 2 discs that spawn, and then more spawn and more spawn and more spawn. So it gets more and more crazy the longer that you manage to survive.
Okay. Are there Any secrets or additional challenges or anything like that? Because
I'm betting there are, but I haven't gotten that deep into it. But yeah, there definitely seems to be, like, I don't know if there's more to the gold discs. Like, I've been in rooms with gold discs that aren't even moving. And it's like the only thing that there is for you to do in that room is to walk into the disc and kill yourself.
What is a gold disc?
It's a gold.
You don't know? Okay.
Yeah, you know, it's like it's a gold disc, and there's a whole series of them. I found like 3, I think, so far.
They do something. It sounds extremely difficult. Has it been frustratingly difficult? Has it been, has the learning process been fun?
The learning process has been fun, and I think, extremely difficult is. It's weird because it kind of depends on like what you're going for, because I've had rooms where it's like, okay, I've completed all of the objectives in this room, and I could move on to a different room, but I still haven't collected enough orbs to like kill this disc. So like, let me see if I can survive long enough to kill that. And another thing that they have in each room is they have like, sort of like a leaderboard style thing where there's just like, there's a dev time displayed like from when you start. So it's like, can I survive long enough to beat that dev time? Can I make it to like 1 minute and 11 seconds or whatever?
If you beat the dev time,
it's very layered.
If you beat the dev time, do you get an advantage in the game?
I don't know yet. I haven't pulled one of those off. I haven't stuck with a room long enough to do that, because there are a lot of rooms. So it's like, it's really easy to just start spreading out and moving on. So I think that's part of it. It's like, if you get frustrated trying to tackle a deeper challenge, and you're like, all right, I'll just try something else and see what's over here.
It'd be neat if they did the thing that other games have done, where not only is there a dev time, but you could see like your friends' times and try to compete against them. And
yeah, as long as there wouldn't be ghosts, because I think there's too much going on for you to deal with seeing somebody else run around on the screen.
Yeah, do you feel like there have been deaths caused because of that, where there's just so much happening that you can't process it? Especially with it sounds like with the cloning that might be an issue.
The cloning, it definitely makes it harder. If you just focus on one character, then you're fine. But it's definitely the hardest one to keep your brain around. The other little tricksy thing that they've done is they call it a disc, although it doesn't really look too much like a disc. But there's some rooms that basically have like teeth that pop up out of the ground, and so you'll see like a little ripple in the sand before they come up, but it can be really easy to just be like trying to dodge a bunch of discs, and then you just land on that spot right in time to get chomped. But in general, I actually feel like, I've played a lot of games like this where I do have a hard time, like a lot of shoot 'em ups and bullet hell things, where like, man, I just cannot quite get it. I can't. My brain isn't seeing everything that I want to be seeing. And I haven't had that experience in this. I think they've done a pretty good job with just visually marking everything towards like, I feel like amazing sometimes that I managed to like weave through all of this crap.
I have so much respect for that in games. We're going to talk about Doom Eternal later on. And speaking about games that have a lot going on, boy, that game sure does. And just from a design perspective, how it uses sound and visual cues in equal measure to make sure, or to try to give you as much information as it can, as quickly as it can. I can just imagine that's really hard to figure out and takes a lot of iteration. But when it is done well, and they do allow you to process it effectively, it feels really, really good.
Yeah. That's a nice thing that they do too. When you use your abilities, there's kind of like a warping to the soundtrack that really augments and makes that feel good.
What is this out on?
I've been playing it on PC. I have to see what else it's on. I think it might be on pretty much anything, but let's see what my email tells me about Disc Room. Let's see. Switch and PC right now.
Switch and PC. The Frame Trap test, Blood, because I know you were kind of looking at a couple of games that you wanted to talk about on Frame Trap, but the Frame Trap test is, after you finish this episode, do you think you'll play any more Disc Room?
I think so. At least I want to. That's always the real question.
Yeah. Don't worry, you're not on the hook or anything.
I'm always trying to like finish everything that I've started. But
yeah, well, it sounds cool. But going back to kind of horror, a game that I've been really looking forward to is Amnesia Rebirth.
Yeah.
And The Dark Descent is a game that I had played previously in the past, but I'd never finished it for one reason or another. And
same story.
I at the beginning, it was definitely because I was too scared. Like, the game just used to scare the shit out of me, so I played as much as I could back, closer to the time that it launched. But last week, I played all the way through it, and Brandon, we were talking about like not throwing around the word masterpiece too much, and I don't know if I maybe want to throw out masterpiece, but I think it is a really great game that holds up in a lot of ways even today.
Good to hear.
And so having that experience fresh in my mind, I was really excited for Amnesia Rebirth, and I also even played through Soma, which I liked a lot. Really liked Soma.
Yeah, I played Soma.
Yeah, and Amnesia Rebirth is hitting me in all of the right places. I'm not even really sure what the general consensus is among fans, but it's...
Yeah, I'm not either.
It's different than Dark Descent in ways that are surprising. It feels kind of like a mix of Dark Descent and Soma, I would say. Your character talks a lot. Very chatty character, and I was actually worried about that going in, but the way that they do the storytelling, everything in this game feels like it feeds in itself. And it's just so smart, and because I feel like they really put themselves in the player's head, and they're like, okay, when a player gets in this area, how are they going to walk around? How are they going to feel? Like, what are they going to look at? Because a lot of times you're put into dark areas, as you might expect, but sort of a new mechanic. It's like a sort of advanced tinderbox where instead of just like lighting a candle, you first have to light a match. And then while that match is burning, you can go around the room and light, different lights, different candles, torches, that sort of thing. But as you're walking around, you see the match burning, and it burns extremely quickly. It does not last that long. And so you kind of get this panic. The game is just, it's not even so much like terrifying. Like I've encountered like one type of monster, and it's not that scary to look at, but it's not so much about like making you jump constantly. It's more about just this constant feeling of stress. And I think the match is a great example of that, where you can hold 10 matches at a time, which seems like a lot, but you'll kind of get into these panic situations where you're like, I need light, and you're burning your matches, and you're freaking out, and then you run out of matches, and you hear your heart pounding, and you're succumbing to the fear. And it's just the way that they turn the dial up on it feels so incredibly smart, because kind of as you're going through the panic, there will be times where you'll see a note, and you feel like you just kind of stumble upon it, and you're like, oh, okay, now I got this little tidbit of lore. Or you stumble into a room and you're like, wait, no, this is actually like part of a puzzle. And so it's this really brilliant blend of, even when you feel like you're stumbling around in the dark, a lot of times it's not that like aimless stumbling. I feel like you tend to stumble somewhere purposeful, or they don't leave you hanging out to dry for too long, because like sometimes you'll be kind of just wandering around and they'll be like, oh, there's light coming from the ceiling, that might be important. And so they're kind of signposting you over there. And so it is just great at making you go, oh God, oh God, oh God, but never oh Godding so hard that you're like, okay, it's time to shut off the game. And I really liked the storytelling in Soma. I don't know how you feel about it, Brandon, but
there were just a couple encounters. Soma was underwater, right?
Yeah.
That was
yep.
Yeah. I don't do dark submerged areas very well.
Interesting.
And so I was kind of excited about like, yes, I am going to do this to myself. And it was one of those games where like, there was one enemy encounter specifically where the game was like really cranking up like the music and the intensity, and I think it was like the light like came out of his head and he's like walking around, and I kind of rope-a-doped him. Like I found some like loop that I was like, oh, I just gotta get around this corner and then I can leave. And there were a couple encounters that way where I was like, this isn't that tough to get away from the bad guy, but then like you get out into open water and like, oof. So it had peaks and valleys. Like it was, when it was over, the story though was 10 out of 10. Holy cow.
Yeah.
That game just leaves you in a very interesting void emotionally when you're finished with it. You're like, this is kind of a sad place to be.
Yeah. Thinking about, Dark Descent, I feel like the way that story comes together is it's just kind of like a very, very, very slow build up. And there's certainly like there's a lot in Rebirth that's keeping you in the dark. And I feel like you are kind of like uncovering a broader mystery, but at the same time, I feel like so much is happening in the story, and I certainly don't want to go into spoilers. But there was a moment that happened, and I was like, oh wow, really? Like I thought we'd be looking for that the rest of the game, and we're not. Okay, cool. And so there's kind of this level of unpredictability to it. There was definitely a moment where I'm like, okay, things are not maybe as safe or expected as I thought they would be. That is really cool. And I think the other thing that I really like about Rebirth is it doesn't rely on the monster chasing. I feel like I am stressed out without the monster even being present, just because darkness can freak you out so much and cause your character to just like completely lose control. And I think because of that mechanic, it's not like, oh, I don't need something to be chasing me to feel that tension. And I think that's really important that they've gone out of their way to do other things. And I also feel like, because like in Amnesia and Soma, you can just kind of pick up everything, and that's like a big part of the novelty is like, oh, I can pick up this cup and spin it around and throw it. I really like where they place items in Rebirth, because a lot of times I'll just be like, oh, I'm just having fun, ha ha ha, picking up this pot, and you spin it around. It's like there were matches in there, in this completely inconspicuous pot that I wasn't thinking about, and so now it's kind of training me to be like, hey, interact with as much as possible. And so I like that as well. I feel like I'm having more meaningful exploration and more reason to kind of poke and prod everything and like lift covers off of stuff and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's great. I also think it's been really well paced. It's hard in games like this where you're just kind of running around solving puzzles in first person and things chase you. I think you run into the danger of things just kind of losing their luster. I think despite doing a lot of good things, like I think Alien Isolation is just too long, for instance. And I'm not finished with Rebirth, so maybe I'll get to that opinion. But just transitioning areas, I feel like I've been in every single spot just as long as I kind of want to be. And it's gone from kind of more focused, like just get to the end sections versus like I was in a fort and it felt a lot more like, oh, I wonder what's over there. And you just had a little bit more room to breathe in some sections of that. So it's been a nice balance. And there's also unexpected transitions where it's like, okay, I'm going along. Oh, I need to go over there. And like, oh, I fell through the floor and suddenly I'm in a totally different situation. And now I guess I'm in this new area. And so I think it definitely keeps you on your toes. But from Dark Descent and Soma and Rebirth, I feel like Frictional just keeps knocking it out of the park. And again, haven't finished this one. Maybe it'll be my least favorite of what they've done so far. But no, they've done a good job. I'm very impressed at the moment. So, Brandon, did you play Machine for Pigs, the second Amnesia game?
I did not. And I did not finish the first Amnesia. I just played enough for a countdown or something. Some feature we did where I was like, it's time. And people keep talking about this. I definitely want to check it out.
It's funny because like, being in my Amnesia kick, I checked out Machine for Pigs and I think I might be hard out because it was made by Chinese Room and you don't have to worry about lantern oil at all. Like,
right.
I don't even know if you have really much of an inventory, but you just didn't have to worry about resources in the same way that you had to do in Dark Descent. I'm like, this is just not as interesting. Like, a huge part of these games is how am I managing resources? Like, oh, I wasted that. Like, it adds so much. And when you don't have that and you're just creeping around and it's just spooky stuff happening, I don't know. It's just not as engaging to me. But yeah, I really like Rebirth. We've got some busy times ahead, so I don't know how slowly or quickly I'll get through it. But grab me in the moment for sure.
Very good to hear. Nice.
And I liked it. Yeah, Huber said like, I don't know if it was on Syndrome or Group Stream or something, but he was like, this is the game. He's like, if you're looking for the game to play, like, if you're just I just
Halloween.
need one game, one scary game, something to get, spook me out on Halloween. It's like, there you go.
It's funny that you say that because I've been playing Outlast as well. And if you just want like something to scare you, Outlast, I feel like that kind of begins and ends there. I mean, there's more to say about Outlast, but like, I don't find the story, at least in Outlast 1, to be that great. Whereas you can play Amnesia Rebirth and yes, it'll probably spook you and yes, it'll probably stress you out a little bit, but there's so much more. Like, I'm playing it also because I really want to see what's going to happen in the story as well. I don't know. I think they, smart takes on horror at Frictional Games. Shout out.
Nice.
But Brandon, I want to give you the BESTAKE for how you talked about Bly Manor. Not as hot on it, but I felt like you handled it pretty respectfully. So what this segment is, just to refresh the audience really quick, is I'll throw Brandon a category. And Brandon, this is like the weirdest one I've ever done, so I hope you're ready. I'll throw Brandon a category, and he has to combo together opinions. So he'll make a statement about the topic I give him. I'll decide if it's good or bad, and we try to keep going for a few of them. The topic this time is gore in horror movies. It's a tricky one.
Oh, there's nothing tricky about it. It's a beautiful thing.
Very glad I do not have this.
All right.
It'd be very difficult for me to come up with something.
Ready. So gore, I guess, as you're traditionally saying, is, it's kind of like in video games, like in Mortal Kombat. Do you want to turn the blood on or off? And some people, everybody has different things that, affect them in horror. Like obviously little kids crying is not something that affected me in my 20s as much as it affects me now. Obviously, if you were to lose a friend or a loved one, and see that in a film, or if you were to have moved, or if you were to have, an abusive relationship or something, there's all sorts of emotional connections. And gore is a fascinating thing because for some people that has very little effect, and for some people that is definitely the thing that they seek. The Saw fans of the world. So it definitely is its own particular genre of horror. It should almost be like at the video store. You can just gore, the signs up there in red.
But the question is, how does it affect you?
How does it affect me?
Yeah, how well do you handle gore?
I handle gore pretty well. It's interesting to... when I think about gore, I think about one time that I was doing the dishes, and there's a food processor that Amanda uses, and boy, is that blade sharp! And that sucker went right into my finger when I was watching it, and I think about that ever since. Every single time I've done it since, I'm just like, you're not gonna do that again, and. I remember when it went in, this was just like a microcosm, a fraction of all of the different thoughts going through my brain. But one of them was, ooh, it's a good cut. It was like that satisfaction, like when you cut into like a good slice of meat and you're like, yeah, that give, the sinew and the flesh starts to separate with the blade, and it just has this raw kind of satisfactory feeling. It was very, very tiny, but it was there. And I remarked on it later, like, that's some creepy ass shit that I thought about. I got that gore satisfaction.
Follow-up question. Have you murdered someone?
I have not. I've gone, but it's like everything in life. So it's like skydiving and bungee jumping, two things I have done. So it's it's on the list. I just I'm in my early 40s. I'll get there.
Which was scarier, skydiving?
Tis
or
the
bungee
season.
Jumping?
Bungee jumping. You wouldn't think so. You wouldn't think. But with skydiving, I was in tandem. So like the guy jumped out and I was attached to him. Whereas like bungee jumping, I had to jump. And the moment my feet left the edge of that bridge, my brain was like, "What did you do?" My brain was mad at me. It was like, "You idiot!" But I eventually enjoyed it.
It's funny because I've been in such a horror mood, but I don't think any part of me wants to go skydiving or bungee jumping. I don't
Oh,
know.
wow.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Freaks me out, man.
I got so desensitized to skydiving because of my brother. So it was funny, that it wasn't that big of a deal to me in a way. I mean, it was definitely fun.
Was your
it's a
brother
great experience.
like a crazy skydiver?
For a while, like he had a phase where 2 or 3 years he was going to the drop zone almost every weekend, and had his own rig and everything, his own chute. But the times between, when you're at the airport and you're just waiting for your turn essentially to go up, you're just sitting around waiting. So he would drag me out there because he was bored. Even though I was underage and I couldn't do it. And so I would just be there watching people skydive all weekend. And then, for my 18th birthday, then he paid for me to get a jump in. But yeah, he got, I want to say 300 or 400 jumps before he got out of it.
Dude.
Wow.
The secret life of Bloodworth. On our honeymoon, we went ziplining in New Zealand.
Oh, great.
And that was fun. But I feel like that's way less scary than bungee jumping and skydiving.
Oh, and the other fun fact about it, that was the first time I had actually been in an airplane.
Oh, at 18.
Nice.
But Brandon, got off track here a little bit. Do you have another opinion about gore in horror movies?
I don't have any gory skydiving stories, unfortunately.
I would hope not.
There are gory... People will tell gory stories about airplanes and accidents when you're sitting around the drop zone. I'll tell you that.
See, man, no. I think if you can do it and you can actually drag yourself to the skydiving place, don't do that.
Right.
Don't make it worse.
Mm-hmm. There's got to be that one guy, right as you're leaving, and did I tell you about my uncle? No, I'm just getting on the plane right now. Please don't. Well, the thing about that you absolutely have to say about gore is humor. I mean, gore is definitely tied to humor. There have definitely been. I think of the Sam Raimi films.
Yes.
There's it's interesting when you see Evil Dead. There kind of is this fascinating dichotomy of it just kind of ping pongs. Normally I hate stuff like this, but it just keeps going back and forth between comedy and horror. You're scared, you're laughing. And he has an intensity to him. I think of the work of Tom Savini. I hope I'm getting his name correct. But a very famous director and actor, and specifically special effects wizard that did lots of blood and guts and stuff. And so it's interesting when I think about specifically the way blood looked in the 80s, it's just very red, very colorful. Now it's a lot more subdued. When you see it, it's a very dark color, but there's just kind of this neon, late 80s, blood, concept of gore. So it's interesting to think of those horror movies. I believe it was either Dawn of the Dead, I think it's Day of the Dead, where they take a guy's head and they rip it off his neck. And he's screaming when this happens. And then the scream gets really high pitched because his larynx is being stretched. And I was like, that looks really unbelievable and silly. And at the same time, what an absolutely horrifying concept that doesn't matter how good the special effects was. It just put that thought in my head. And I'm like, oh, well, that's terrifying. And I'll think about that until the day I die. Just that idea, knowing that that, horrible thing could happen. And then I saw outtakes of that. And it's always fun to see outtakes of popular horror films. And you have all these zombies just screaming, and then they yell cut, and everyone cracks up. Everyone in the room, all the zombies with stuff in their mouth and everything, the person being eaten, because it's so ridiculous what they're doing. But that's shooting horror movies.
You just made me think to myself, it sounds so much fun to be in a horror movie. To be a zombie or something. I would love that. That'd be great.
I shot a zombie film in film school in college, and there was nothing not fun about that. We were shooting, it was 5 a.m. We were exhausted. We were just cracking up the whole time. It was great.
You mentioned Sam Raimi and Evil Dead, and I've been watching Ash vs. Evil Dead, the TV series, and it feels like every episode somebody is getting a fountain of blood or some other gross liquid just thrown on them. It just happens. I don't know if I feel bad for these actors or if it's fun or what, but they're just they're just drenched in blood all the time, all of them. It's great. It's very entertaining. All right, do you think you've got one more gore take before we move on?
Sure. Well, I mean, there is, I was talking about late 80s, 90s gore, and I think there definitely is a change in gore, kind of more realistically, I think of something like, we talked about Midsummer earlier in that, and the reason why I was like, Midsummer was just completely on the list, and then the moment I saw it on some streaming service, I immediately went to it, was because the same guy that did Hereditary. And Hereditary has the gore, but like it's much more now about kind of a raw visceralness, like sound design comes into it a lot more, realism. Just watched Sweeney Todd, which is a fun movie to go back and watch. It's kind of like a theme park ride. It's like it's a kind of unbelievable and goofy, and but at the same time, a lot of fun practical effects. And one effect that they did, which I thought was really, really well done and very creepy, was obviously there's. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not Sweeney Todd. Ichabod Crane. Hello, Sleepy Hollow. The other things that's 2 words and starts with S. And there's a lot of decapitated heads in Sleepy Hollow, and there's a surprising amount of gore in this, and it's actually kind of like, I wouldn't mind if a teenager watched this. I think if Milo was like 14, and I'm like, sure, I mean, you've probably seen lopping off of heads. That happens in fairy tales. It's like, sure, fine. There's definitely kind of more severe. Hereditary, no. But it's like these old English chaps getting their heads lopped off. I think that's fine. But there's one shot where a little kid, his mom gets her head lopped off and upstairs, and he's down underneath the floorboards. And they actually had the actor roll over and look between the floorboards, kind of where her head stopped rolling. And so it's like it's a very easy practical effect. They just got the actor to do it, but just the way they sped up the film and the fact that like, that's not a fake head, that's actual eyes like looking through the floor. Definitely has much more of an impact, because when you see the like fake head lift up off the ground later, it's like, okay, like that, something about your brain that you're like, I know that's not real. The reveal of a head, like I know it's not. It's just kind of like how you do sound design, how you have the story leading up to that. So it's interesting seeing effect work get so much better, but directors at the same time realizing like, just because it does look real doesn't mean we should go nuts with it. It's one of my least favorite scenes in Alien. Alien is such a good film, except it has one of the worst special effects I've ever seen in horror or sci-fi or anything, where Ian Holm is, like smashed apart and they try to put it back together. And it's just this like dumb Ian Holm plastic head, like, the 70s. So, gore.
I think part of what makes some of the violence in Midsommar so terrifying is the fact that it happens in broad daylight as well. And it's just like such a casual... Yeah. I'm thinking of one scene kind of in the beginning, but go ahead.
It's kind of like Jaws, where it's just this, horrifying moments set in the middle of gorgeous ocean, like on a beautiful day, but when stuff like that's done well.
Yeah. You talk about like the build up and the story that you're doing. And I only saw the movie once in theaters, but I think one of the things that like got to me the most, and I don't want to ruin it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but the very end, the very, very, very end of Drag Me to Hell and what happens, really like made my stomach churn because of the journey that they went on and then what ultimately ended up happening. Like it was like tragedy.
Slam dunk.
Yeah.
And it's that's another thing about horror that I think horror can pull off, like mystery too, like thrillers and stuff. But like, if I've seen some pretty mediocre horror films that had a dynamite ending, and it's like, ooh, put that one on the shelf. It's just so satisfying after an hour 40 minutes to have them be like, and life sucks for everybody, credits. You're like, yes. Like I always love when somebody gets screwed at the end of a horror movie, where it's like, oh, they're out. No, they're not. Like, ha ha ha. It's great.
This BESTAKE, thank you, Brandon, for the takes. This BESTAKE is brought to you by some wonderful shout outs to your patrons. If you would like us to shout you out on all of our podcasts, go to patreon.com/easyallies, where you can find more information. And so I think I'm going to read all of these shout outs. And then what I thought we would do, panel, for this shout out edition is say shout out in as scared a voice as we can muster. Be as afraid as you can make yourself be. Or, however you want to interpret that. So shout out to Elthanas, Greg, TheDarkKnight Kettering, and Caleb Togi Crawford.
Shout out.
It was like an effect impression on your voice. I liked it.
Yeah.
Blood. What is I Am Dead?
That's a good question because I don't think I actually had the best reference for what I thought it was going to be compared to what it is. So I had this perception that this would be kind of essentially a point and click adventure game. And in a way, it pulls on those strings, but it's more of like a 3D hidden object game.
Okay.
Which can sound less interesting than it is. But essentially, it starts off with you in first person walking down a beach, and you're just reminiscing and relaxing. And it's a very chill, relaxing game overall. But then you get to this bench and you're like, oh yeah, that's my name. And then and you see the death date on the bench. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't mention I am dead. And then that's when the title screen pops up.
Is that played comedically?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a bit of comedy in here. And really like the vibes of the game, I was again just kind of like with Discrim. I'm trying to like what is the best way to sort of like encapsulate what this is like. And I feel like I going back to like I'm watching an episode of Reading Rainbow. It's like it's almost like it's made to be like a kid's book, but it's a little more like emotionally in depth than you would get out of a kid's book. But like a lot of the way the art style looks and just kind of the vibes of things gives you that feel.
Wait a minute. Are you saying Reading Rainbow has great emotional depth?
No, what I'm saying this game, like it goes like deeper into like people's backstories and things and stuff that like a kid probably wouldn't connect to, right?
Okay.
But it makes you feel like something that you experienced when you're a kid, a bit more. And so essentially the way things work, so you're a ghost, you haven't been dead that long, but then pretty early on, you used to be a curator at this museum, and then you kind of like go and visit the museum, and you start getting these clues to like about how you interact with the world and stuff. And so with this sort of hidden object thing, is it kind of gives you like this joy and this kind of sense of wonder of just being able to like look at objects and turn them around and like zoom into them and what they call like slicing through them. So like you kind of like hold the shoulder buttons to like zoom in and out in a way to where you can peek inside of things.
That actually sounds very similar to Amnesia.
Yeah, there's like this satisfaction of being able to look into something. And so if there's a bit of luggage, on the ground, and you peek inside that bit of luggage, and like you can say, okay, there's some clothes and some shoes, and then like a toothbrush and razor, and it's like a lot more detail than you might expect. And like even if you zoom into like a pile of pencils, you can slice through it to the point where like you see the pencil lead go all the way through the pencil.
Oh, neat.
Or you see like a little like a mound of dirt in the forest, and you zoom in and like, oh, there's like a rabbit den, and there's some baby bunnies over here, and there's a carrot over here, and there's some other little whatever, like some things that the rabbits drug underground. And so there's that satisfying element. And so with that mechanic, then they kind of they say to look for this object. And so the first object that you look for is sort of the dog tag on your dog, and you look into the dog's urn, and there's the ashes with the dog tag on top. And when you do that, essentially like you're able to connect to the ghost of your dog.
Blood, this sounds so much like Ghost Trick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. But you're not like setting up kind of like these sequences of events in the same manner. But then your dog starts talking to you, and you're like, whoa, you can talk now that you're a ghost? And your dog's like, no, I could always talk, you just couldn't understand me. And the dog basically starts explaining to you like the rules of the afterlife and what's going on. And you're on this island, and there's this volcano there that everybody thought was dormant, but it's starting to smolder a bit. And you even like your character starts arguing with the dog, and it's like, no, that volcano's dormant, there's nothing to worry about there. And it's like, no, the custodian has been keeping the volcano from erupting, and now basically the custodian's been there for who knows however many years, he's getting bored. He wants to retire, and we've got to find a new custodian.
I hope
or
that
the
custodian
volcano
is getting paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the volcano will erupt and destroy the whole town, the whole island. And so you essentially basically have to go around the town and the island and try to find these other ghosts of people that you knew when you were alive, and essentially try to find the right candidate who's going to be the new custodian. And so the way you go about doing that is you go to a location. So the first location that you go to is a lighthouse where they've had yoga retreats. And the person that founded the yoga retreats and all of that, he's passed away, and you're going through his students. And so basically, like with the dog, with the memento of the dog tag,
Mm-hmm.
you have to find mementos that will connect you to the yoga instructor's ghost. And to find the right objects that are going to be meaningful, you have to interact with the memories of his yoga students and go through what they remember about him and different situations that they had. And then by doing that, you'll be able to identify an object, and then you'll look through the level to find that object.
Okay, so the memories are not tied to the objects. The memories are how you find out what the objects are.
Right.
So do you get the memories by interacting with people?
Yeah, so you find a person, and certain people will have like little thought bubbles popping up over their head. And then as the same way that you slice through an object, you sort of slice into the person's mind. And then you kind of do this thing with the triggers where you pull like an image into focus by, you go left and right until you get it like perfectly lined up. And when you do that, then they will kind of narrate a scene. And then once they're done talking, for a couple of sentences, then you click to the next thing, and you've got to, pull the next scene into focus until you eventually narrow in on like what this next object you're going to look for is.
Bringing the object into focus sounds like it would only be okay if you don't have to kind of slice into people all the time. But if it's something you're doing constantly, I can imagine that mechanic getting a little bit annoying.
I think it works because it's a storytelling mechanic, and so like that's it's not just that it's you're finding the object, but this is like where all the meaning to this stuff is. So that's why I'm saying it's like it's more interesting than you would think from a hidden object game, because the objects are the way that they build this world, and they build up each of these characters and the people that they've interacted with over time.
How is this game sort of broken up? Like, is it divided up into specific areas? So like the lighthouse is an area and this town is an area, or is it all like seamless? Like, I guess how open is it when you're kind of hunting around for things?
Yeah, so I would say that there's different locations that essentially act as levels, and like each of I think there's like 5 or 6 people that it looks like, I don't know if it gets even further later in the game, but at this point it looks like there's 5 or 6 people that you're going to do in sequence, and so each one of them is tied to a location. And so like with the lighthouse, you can kind of circle around the whole lighthouse and go up and down the different floors and look for people and look at objects. And what's kind of interesting is that you can also just sort of mouse over things and look at objects that are not the thing that you're looking for. And in certain instances, there will be more story to this object, or there will be like a garden room, and you can mouse over the plants, and like there'll just be like botanical facts about these plants and their Latin names and things like that. And so there's just a lot of like extra little things to discover, including some like side objectives. What are they called? These little creatures, Grenkins. And again, these look like something just like straight out of a kid's book, to where when you get to certain rooms, the dog will start sniffing. It's like, oh, I think there's a Grinkin in here. And you'll just get like this image that looks, a lot of times it'll look abstract, because what you then have to do is you kind of have to like look through different objects and kind of slice in and out until you get sort of this cross section that matches the image there, and then you've discovered the Grinkin. And so far, I haven't seen those be of any use other than to just be like additional objectives, like additional just like collectible kind of things. But then there's also a character. The second area is like a sculpture garden where like a bunch of artists have just, crafted all of these different installations and things. And there is a character called Mr. Wistable, who's like a little goat character who talks to you when you find this map of the garden.
I like how this game is naming things so far.
Yeah. And he will give you, essentially they will just be like they call them riddles, but it's just like 2 or 3 word clues, and you'll have essentially a timer to, okay, this thing is in the level, go figure out what it's talking about, So and so it makes more sense to kind of do that after you've done a few of the other puzzles in there, and then sort of hunt down what they're doing. But it's like I said, there's that interesting thing of like just that discovery of, okay, I'm gonna see what's here, what can I interact with? There's some kids in a treehouse, and then like, okay, there's a little box there in the treehouse as well, and what's in that? It's like, oh, there's a kazoo, and there's like an arrowhead, and it's like all of these things that just they make sense, but there's just this satisfaction of peeking inside of things.
Yeah, I like in games like that. To me, it's you can pull something like that off in a very limited level of detail and coloring of stuff, just as long as something is physically there and I can recognize it. Like a lot of times, just the seeing something in a space is enough. It doesn't necessarily have to be like the most realistic looking tiny object I've ever seen, but just being like, oh, look at that, and I love just the kind of like the dollhouse aspect of this, where you're just kind of opening up doors, and I've always loved models and stuff. So like, damn, I'm this might be creeping up my list of games I'm never ever going to play in 2020.
It sounds super intriguing. You've done a very good job of describing it. When you kind of get to, once you've pieced everything together and you get to a ghost, does just sort of like a straightforward story segment play, or is it more of like you choose what to talk to them about and you have dialogue options?
You don't really have dialogue options that I've seen yet, but I basically have just done the first one. I didn't complete the second one yet.
Sure.
But there is a bit of a like an extra little, I guess I would call mini game to it. So once you've found all of the mementos, and what's funny too is that sometimes you're not just dealing with people. Like one of the mementos in the lighthouse was like there was this cormorant sitting on a perch. And you go through, and like its memory was it had stolen the lighthouse keeper's Rubik's Cube and put it in its nest. And it's like, oh, they were really mad. They really liked that thing. And then the Rubik's Cube was the memento. And then even the lighthouse, like the lens on the lighthouse, like you mouse over that, and like it gives you like this whole like historical backdrop of like who like invented that like that system, like the lighthouse lens and everything, and the lighting. So so it's a lot of these like things that you don't necessarily expect when you're just exploring. But anyways, so when you find the whole series of mementos in a level, then your dog Sparky pops out, and okay, like now I've got to hunt down the fragments of the ghost. And so basically you just like fly around, circle around the lighthouse, and like bark at the fragments, almost like you're a sheepdog gathering sheep, and then bring them all to like the main fragment that you can recognize of that person, and sort of reassemble them, and then you can talk to them.
Cool. Do you have any idea how long the game is? You said you put about 2 hours into it?
Yeah, I put about hour and a half or 2 hours. It doesn't seem that long. There's obviously, like I was saying, there's a lot of extra space that you can explore and play around and look at different things in the levels. So if the map and what I've seen so far is any indication, I would guess it would probably be like 6 or 8 hours, but I don't know if it would have something that would lead you into like another zone later on. or if the levels get more complex because I just did the first one.
Brandon, are you ready to talk to me about CastleStorm II?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk to you about both Castle Storms.
Yeah.
Man.
Oh, okay.
I feel like I have no knowledge of CastleStorm
Because some people out there might be like, "What storm?"
Yeah, but I feel like every time it comes up, you're like a CastleStorm cheerleader. It's very endearing.
Yeah, it's a simple game. It's a very World of Warcrafty kind of jokey vibe. You know, everything you just Stormwind with the big gold shoulder pads. You know, just that kind of like fantasy.
It's funny because Warcraft can either be like extremely jokey or like deathly serious. Like it really.
No, this is all jokey all the time. Lots of self-referential humor. Lots of slapstick, and it is action strategy. I like a little bit of strategy. Action in my strategy. And the first CastleStorm attracted me with just like a trailer, a screenshot. I just kind of saw. I was like, wait, how is this game working?
This was 360.
This was 360p PS3. I played it on 360. I don't know if it was on PS3, but this is last gen. And this is not something where like this gen, they, are like really, really cranking up, the visuals. It is a cute and pretty game, but it is a strategy game where you are doing a lot of stuff. I want to start with CastleStorm because one of the things that's fascinating is how different CastleStorm 2 is. But in the heart of CastleStorm is that you are defending a castle on typically the left side of the screen. Your attackers are also come from a castle, although not always, on the right side of the screen. And you are defending your base, maintaining all the action that's happening in the middle of the field, and trying to destroy their castle all in real time, all at the same time. And so you have to manage projectiles that you're throwing over at this castle, any sort of defensive measures that you want to do to stop things from hitting your castle, and you can also send troops that'll move at their pace. Like mounted things will move faster than just swords. Like archers will stop at some point and will shoot stuff from range, but are also susceptible from other things that are happening. I remember in the old game, I haven't gotten to this point, but you could like send out griffins that'll clear out the air in between castles. And so it's kind of fun juggling all of these different, getting into the rhythm of knowing the controls so that I can like be managing one thing or see when something goes off cooldown, or I get enough resources to like send a really expensive unit through. And so now and you're just constantly leveling stuff up, and then the level will be easier the next time you do it if you choose to level up a defense or something.
Now I know why you're so into this, because it sounds like it's perfectly scratching that tower defense itch.
Yeah, which I love so much, but mostly like just this kind of Plants vs. Zombies progression build. I love it so much, and tower defense does that a lot, where you start with very little, but then by the end of a level, you just have like a lot of different plates spinning, and it's fun to kind of manage that and feel like, to start very small, but then feel just like this huge force that you're pushing against something.
So
some levels you just barely survive, and some levels it's like, oh man, I just cut right through that thing and crushed it.
How do you get resources to kind of produce all the things that you need to defend an attack?
It just collects over time.
Okay.
And you can, depending on how what you've leveled up, you can choose to level up that speed. If you're like, okay, and that's me. Like I tend to go after resources as opposed to like strength and magic power and stuff like that. It's like, I'll get to that later. I just want to make sure I'm constantly being given the stuff that I need. And I haven't gotten into super crazy base building in 2, but you can't bring everything into a base because your castle can only be a certain size depending on the level that you're doing. And so you can you can set up like an auto castle, because I didn't really want to, min-max that too much. I was like, but you can place different things in your castle, and then depending on what is in your castle will affect what you can do in each level. And whatever they destroy, you lose that. So if you're like, okay, well, I put my archers top right, but that's the first thing that they can hit in my castle. When that archer room goes down, you can't summon archers anymore.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it was just a fun game. I kept coming back to it because it's a fun game to like level up. It's just kind of my whole approach to strategy and RPGs and everything. It's just fun to be like, I am way too powerful. And I got to a point. I remember there was one item that was just this giant hammer, and I was just like, like 15 seconds I destroyed that castle. That was fun. And I don't know if you've played this, if you had this situation, Blood, you play a lot of indie games, and I can't recall another specific example, but it definitely is a very particular mood where you play a game that you're so into. Cat Quest 1 comes to mind on the Switch, where I was like, oh, that was fun. Then they announce a sequel, and you're like, you know what? If this is only $10-20 or something, I don't need a reason. I know I'm going to play this. I know I'm at least going to jump in for this for 2 hours. So just let me know when that game finally launches and I'll check it out. And you like don't watch any trailers. You don't watch any, you're just like, I know it's going to satisfy me because it's not that big of an investment. And then you jump in and you're like, wait, what? They, like the developers decided like, no, we have weird ideas for the sequel. And you're like finally going through it. Like it doesn't happen a lot with AAA games because I watch so many trailers. We talk about it so much. Like I know Cyberpunk, it's like the plot will surprise me, but like I already know what class I'm going to pick. I already know what car I want, you know, whereas like in this, I went in and they were like, surprise, we have a civilization, like 6-sided cube thing,
hex-based map.
I'm sorry, the hex-based map that you have to control, and now you got to build buildings before you build up resources. You're leveling up, you know, that now too, and now you have to move as far as you can, and then end your turn before the enemy can move in and even decide what battles you're going to be getting into. And I was like, whoa, like I only got 6 hours before I have frame trap. You know, like how I'm like, so at the point I am with CastleStorm 2, I'm still kind of learning the ropes. Like there's a lot of new systems that they added onto it. So I'm kind of divided where I am enjoying a lot of these things on top of it, but I was not expecting, you know, all of this other stuff to happen. And so it's, you know, they definitely didn't, you know, we're just, we'll just have some story or some fun idea. And that's, you know, I recently talked about Orcs Must Die, and like that very much follows the format of like same thing you love, a little bit extra. And this is like same thing you love with all sorts of crazy new systems built on top of it that you're going to have to get through.
So
I'm enjoying mostly, but it's just a lot. You're
obviously still at the beginning, but does any part of you just kind of on those initial reactions feel like maybe they ruined the simplicity a little bit?
No, it just took me, it's simplicity based on right where I left the series. So like right when I left this, I was bouncing between menus. I was picking one level to get 5-star on it because I never did, now that I've leveled this one unit up to a certain point. Whereas at the point I am now with CastleStorm 2, like I'm actually kind of into the story, figuring out what they're doing with some of these characters and like vaguely remembering like, oh yeah, there was that tribal gal. I wonder if she's coming back, or like, I wonder if I unlock her, because a lot of the stuff was just given to you in CastleStorm 1, whereas in this one, it's like, no, I actually went on like a mission to then, okay, now I got the archer because I rescued him, and okay, now he's a part. Whereas like, it's just like, level 4, here's an archer. Like that's how CastleStorm 1 worked. And so it's just, everything is thought out. There's like a step to all of it in terms of like, not only the resources that you get, but like how you're progressing across the map. And, you know, it was literally just like level 3, you know, now is, you know, oh, okay, now I'm in the forest, I guess. So it's interesting to play something that I didn't necessarily think it wasn't broke, so it didn't need fixing, but it's interesting to see the team, you know, be like, this is a series that we thought was capable of more. There were more systems that we wanted to add to it, as opposed to just like different units, different backgrounds. You know, when I initially saw it, there's like a zombie vibe that kind of runs through, like a necromancy vibe that kind of sparks the plot, which is fun to have in October.
Necromancy is so cool.
Yeah. It's so hot right now. But I thought, so when I initially saw the trailer, just kind of piecing it together in my head, I'm like, oh, I bet you're like the bad guys this time. You know, I bet that's the spin. It's like, it's the same old setup that you love. It's just the units change. Now you're playing as all the things you were fighting before. Whereas it's like, no, this is a whole new crazy thing. Even just the logo has like bat wings on it. So I was like, oh, this will have jolly, you know, Halloween vibes.
With a big weakness that I have, Brandon, with strategy games is I really get into my own head. And I tend to like start strategy games over repeatedly, where I'm like, oh no, wait, now that I know this, why would I ever do that? And like, I just am very punishing with myself. Cause as you're learning the game, right, you're going to make really dumb mistakes. Yeah. How do you feel like it has accommodated the learning process? Cause it sounds like you have to like, you're expanding across this map, and so you have to place things. And so have you run into that situation yet where you place something and you're like, oh no, that was a terrible spot to put that there?
Yeah, a little bit more than I did certainly in the first game, because the first game I was just like, oh, I'll happily play that again because that level was only a couple minutes, you know, and I totally get the strategy. I didn't know 3 minutes in they were going to drop that big giant ogre thing on me, but like I do now, so I will have more troops down below, and I'm actually eager to do well. Like I'm eager to face that threat that I know is coming. Where in this, you kind of do have to pick up the pieces, not in like a cruel Banner Saga type way, but like there definitely is a like, well, you lost that battle, you lost a little ground, or you know, you lost some resources. And so it's tricky. I feel bad. I always hate bringing this up because it's a little behind the scenes, like how the sausage is made. But like, it would definitely be a different thing if I wasn't hustling to get this done in terms of coverage. You know, it wasn't like, because I I'm piecing together everything I'm going to work on, Ben, especially this week for the patron party. And it was just like, all right, 3 hours will suffice with that. And it's like, no, you know, like whoops, I should have done more research. Like I thought I was getting back into this game that I knew I would, like this first level, I'm going to crush it. Right. And it's just like, whoa, new character, new mechanics, like I'm actively, it starts off very action heavy. Like in a lot of the first couple levels, it's just you hacking and slashing. And I was like, is this like a totally different game? Or
I mean, it makes sense why you would assume that, though, just based on your experience with the first game. And so it's really interesting how much this is throwing you for a loop. I feel like with tower defense games, and I know that this game is very different from the first CastleStorm, but when you finish an encounter, is there like a ranking that you get? It's like, hey, you got 3 out of 3 stars or something like that. Yeah. And does that affect progression at all? Like, do you get more rewards if you do extra?
You get more currency if you do well per level. You get more, ability to level people up. And so that's the question. There is some stuff that you can repeat, at once you get to a certain place in the campaign. And so it is rewarding, like to go back and be like, oh wait, once you remember, like, oh, it's been so long since I did that level. Let me just go completely dominate at that now and check that off. So it's fun. I like. It's a struggle because I definitely do lean more towards things like that, where like you'll allow me to go back and just kind of like stomp some part of the game that was giving me trouble before, as opposed to like an RPG system that's like always chasing you and always like, no, challenge, everywhere. And like, it's kind of, I don't know. I kind of like to flex, my XP gain a little bit sometime in games like this. And so it does kind of have both of those things where like there is a part you can go where you're learning new stuff and getting new abilities that's difficult. And then you can go back to other stuff. And
Brendan, in a way, you sound like the perfect MMO player, because I feel like for some people, like one of the best parts of an MMO is flexing, going into the hub and being like, look what I've got. But,
yeah. Well, I jumped into World of Warcraft very late, and so it was fun to go to like, what's the Scarlet Monastery? It was fun to like go like Scarlet Monastery and just solo it. It's like a level like 75 hunter, and I'm just like da da da. And there's a boss, like I will kill him, and like okay, what's that? Just to experience it, to learn, hear the music, and get a sense of the story. Like, oh yeah, I always flew past this. Right. I never knew what it was, but like, oh neat, okay. Blackrock Spire, like never ran it, but I'll just run through it by myself. It's fun.
With like the November rush of reviews coming and next gen, of course. And with CastleStorm II being so different, is this something that you see yourself returning to, or you just don't have time for, or it's like too complex to really keep up with, or?
It's got a shot. Okay. I think this, I could see this as something. It depends, because I'm just anticipating that like next gen lull will be in February. It'd be like next gen, it's like we got this rush, and then it's like, whoa, where'd all the games go? And like it'll kick back up before summer. Like March and April are going to be massive. But so yeah, it's just because it's so easy to look at it from a completionist perspective, to see that like 5-star, 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 4-star. And it's like, like there's something in your brain. You're just like, I got to check that off, even if I don't,
Well, yeah, it's the kind of thing invested. With Disc Room too. Like I was saying, when you look at that map and you're like, all these boxes are yellow. Why is that one white?
Yeah.
Oh, I should go back to that one.
And like I said, the action aspect of it is like, it's in one end, it's a timing thing where you're like, oh, okay, I gotta wait, to do this thing, and then I'm going to use that ability, or what am I bringing this troop in for? I got to bring in this other type of troop. But at the same time, like one of the things, you have this like, crossbow on the top of your fence that you shoot things. And so you kind of have to learn Angry Bird style, that angle, on when you're going to hit something. And when like a wolf is coming out and you just headshot it, from like 50 yards, it's like, yes, so like it's fun. It's kind of got that 3-point, feel when you sink it. But at the same time, it's like, you're wrestling with like, okay, now I'm going to do the cooldown and bring in my hero, and now I can take out like 20 guys at once. And so it's fun to have all of those different not like practices, I guess, skills, to be getting good at the same time. That'll affect performance, like that 5. And then one of the things, I think the 5th star is always time. So it's like you could do really well, but if you like, took too long, if you just kind of let everything come to you before you defended yourself, it's like you got to be a little more, a little quicker.
How long does an encounter take in CastleStorm 2?
no more than like 5 minutes.
Okay.
I think. Like,
Okay.
yeah, they're all pretty quick.
Um,
Which again is why it's a likely game I could potentially go back to, because it's like, oh, let me just boot up CastleStorm and
sure.
click, get to that level, try it.
But speaking of a lot to manage, I've started the Doom Eternal DLC, Doom Eternal: The Ancient Gods Part 1. And I feel like pretty much after, maybe not every fight, but after many of the fights, I'm like, I need a break. That was insane. And I'm sure part of that is because I've been off the Doom Eternal horse for a little bit now. But I also just think it is just so incredibly intense. And it's funny because you start the DLC and you see like a couple of fodder enemies and you're like, oh, okay, they're going to ease me in. And then just all of a sudden, like the monster walls are closing in, and before you know it, they just don't stop. And like every room you go into, it is like, okay, big encounter, waves of enemies. And it has just been relentless. But I think what I'm admiring so much about the Ancient Gods is, even though they're turning up the knob, it's not like, oh, I don't want to play this, or oh, this is frustrating, or oh, they've ruined it. Like, one, I think it speaks to how well designed Doom Eternal was from the get-go, where there's just so much strategy that you have to apply with a bunch of split-second decisions. And it's like, okay, oh, I see that enemy. They need to be dismantled this way with this weapon and this attachment. Or like, oh, okay, I'm going to freeze them and jump over here. And just like how much you have to know your weapons, how much you have to know the enemies, how much you have to know each and every arena that you're in, and how quickly you have to learn all of it, because it can change. Like, all of those things are constantly changing, and it's just incredibly satisfying to master. And what I've loved about the Ancient Gods is I feel like there's so much thought put into these encounters. And I think even if you go back to classic Doom, right? You think of old school Doom, there are definitely like doors that you would open and it'd just be like, haha, here's a ton of enemies. Well, it can kind of look like that at a glance here. I feel like how they're layering enemies and how they're ramping up the challenge and where they're putting you in, like, it's so careful, where you have to learn it, and it's brutal, but there's kind of you can see the construction that went into it. It doesn't feel all thrown together, which is really cool. And I've only done the first level so far of the DLC, but already I feel like I've encountered so much, and it's felt like a pretty expansive level, and I just don't know if that's because the difficulty is so high that like things are taking longer. But man, it really takes you on a journey. You're like kind of on like this like oil rig looking structure in the middle of the ocean, and there's one moment where you're looking out in the sea and you see like all of these destroyed boats, and you're like, oh, that's like a little bit of a different vibe than what I feel like you normally get from Doom, which is cool, despite the fact that it's, you know, very like sci-fi and industrial for a lot of it, but that one element with the boats felt a little bit different. But yeah, so you have all of these different combat encounters, but there's also a good emphasis on just platforming and finding secrets, which is always fun, and just scouring that map trying to get everything. They add a diving suit, and you can go underwater.
Oh. Whoa.
Yeah. And as you're underwater, you can pick up oxygen, and it's fun exploring and trying to find secrets under the ocean, but I don't think the diving suit adds all that much. Like, you can't shoot when you're underwater, and you the only thing you can really do is dash. And so it's
Do you think you'll get something later that you shoot underwater? Or is
I don't
it
know.
just
Yeah.
one level?
Yeah, so that's important to say, as I don't know how this mechanic will evolve over time. But like with the platforming, and in this DLC, there are moments where you're like, okay, how do I get up there? And you like really need to try to figure it out. Whereas this, it's kind of like, okay, I open this thing, I go here. It's just a little bit more straightforward, I think is what I'm trying to say. And oxygen is kind of placed at points that I so far, right, still early on, haven't felt like, oh man, there's a lot of pressure, or oh, I'm going to run out, or oh, I really need to manage this properly. That hasn't really come into play. And so it's a mechanic that I'm just like, it's not that great. But again, it just I say that, and it feels like such a small part that it's not a huge criticism. I think when the meat and potatoes of what you're here for in a Doom game is so good, and kind of like with Doom Eternal, where they do have platforming, they don't have so much platforming that it takes away from why you're there, which is to shoot things. And so it's not distracting or anything. I think it's just when you really focus in on it, you're just like, that's kind of whatever. And the new enemy that I've encountered so far is a turret, which is an eyeball. And I certainly don't think it's the most interesting enemy in the game, but it has a kind of cool mechanic where if you aim at it for too long, it'll hide itself. And you have to be within a certain distance to shoot it. And so you have to kind of manage that appropriately, where it's like, okay, I have to get in there and I have to shoot it really quick. And so you feel a little bit of that tension of like, oh, I gotta get it before it goes away. And on its own, it's kind of a small thing, but you combine that with all of the other Doom Eternal enemies where it's like, okay, I gotta shoot the arm off of this thing, I gotta shoot the missile thing off of this thing. And so it's just another layer on this like Rubik's Cube that you're trying to solve while you're going 100 miles a minute, which is neat. And this DLC definitely isn't just combat encounters. It is definitely continuing off from where Doom Eternal as a story left, and it is expanding upon the lore. What I am thinking to myself as I am reading these notes that I'm collecting in the Doom Eternal DLC is like, wow, this story is really convoluted. And I think on some level it's kind of fun just to see how ridiculous it's getting. But there's also a part of you that's like, I don't know if this needs to be this convoluted. Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? So that's definitely coming into play as well, though. But yeah, it's brutal, and I feel like I'm going through it slowly, but I'm loving the hell out of it. And I think it's doing something that I love that DLC does, where it's like, oh, right, this is why I reviewed this game so highly. This is why I love this so much. Right. And, despite just ultimately boiling it down to the point where so far it just feels like, yeah, you're just taking what was good about this thing and turning up the knob. I think what was there originally was so good that turning the knob up is just making me all sorts of happy. So I'm really, really, really enjoying it. I think it has done a fantastic job. Just the way that this shooter is designed mechanically and the intensity that they're able to bring to every fight is so, so cool. I really hope that more allies get to check out Doom Eternal before Game of the Year as well, because I
Me too.
hope it will come up. But one thing I will say, and I'm curious if you guys have ever felt this in like a shooter or an action game, where definitely part of the appeal of Doom Eternal is figuring out the use for all of your weapons and all the different types of enemies, where it's like, oh, okay, if I encounter this thing, I'm going to use like if I encounter a cacodemon, I'm going to shoot a sticky grenade into its mouth with the shotgun. It's like, okay, cool, I'm going to do that. But like, when I think, because in Doom Eternal in the DLC, they give you everything out the gate. Like, you've got it all. And you're going through these combat encounters and the speed is just so intense. You have so many options. Like, you have a whole wheel full of options. And then you also have like your flame belch and 2 different types of grenades and your chainsaw, and all of these weapons have all these different attachments. And it's like, on one hand, it's neat, it's all there. But on the other, I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, maybe we don't need this many tools. Like, it's hard to imagine like effectively using absolutely everything in your toolkit, because like it's just so much for your brain to process. And I wonder if there'd be any benefit by just trimming some of it down, I guess.
Right. Well, I haven't played Eternal yet, but with the first one, you had like the hidden challenge rooms, right, where you would be limited to just a specific weapon. And really, that really brings it out in a way that like, oh, okay, now I've like understand how to use this a lot better.
Right.
Do you think that continues in Eternal, or they?
Well, in Eternal, the way that they're kind of like these secret challenges that you can find, and it'll be like this kind of statuesque thing, and you go and you interact with it, and it's like, okay, you have to kill like these 3 enemies in 6 seconds or something, but you're not limited necessarily in what you could use. Like if you have it, you can use it. But the thing is, you're still in the level, so like if you use those resources, you've used them, right? And then there are also these Slayer gates, which are extra hard encounters that you go through. But again, you're not really limited with what you can bring into the fight, at least as far as I can remember. But yeah, and it's not like I can really think like, oh, that tool is super useless. But it's just like, I was talking to somebody today and they were like, yeah, I just don't use freeze grenades. And it's just like, oh, I don't. And I'm like, I couldn't imagine me playing without using freeze grenades. Like they seem like the strongest thing in the game to me. And so I guess that is one benefit of having so much stuff, is you create kind of different play styles, and you can watch one of Doom Eternal Planner and it's like, oh, they lean more on these weapons, whereas I lean more on those weapons. And so maybe it's not necessarily about using everything effectively. It's about finding play style, I guess. So yeah, Doom Eternal continues to kick ass. Really like that game a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good thing to bring up because, you know, as someone who hasn't been following the game, I don't feel like there's been a lot of talk about this DLC. Like, I feel like I wouldn't have known it was coming out if you weren't asking me about it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like sometimes there's games like that where they support it, they put out good additional content, but it doesn't rise to the surface. It's like the Ghost of Tsushima update, right? Everybody's talking about that thing, you know, and so it's really good to hear that, like, hey, this thing that you weren't paying attention to is actually really good. It's actually really worth diving into and breaking Doom Eternal back out again.
Yeah, I think with DLC, I have to imagine that there's like just this golden window of interest, just because there's so much coming out. And I feel like with Ghost of Tsushima, they kind of hit that window where the game came out, everybody played it, it was very well received, and then went away for just long enough that when it came back up, it captured a lot of attention. Plus the update they were doing is just so different than what you experienced in the main game, right? Like it's this brand new multiplayer mode, right? Like it's a completely transformative thing. Whereas Doom Eternal, like that game came out towards the beginning of the year. It's been a really long time. I don't think they did a great job of communicating what the DLC was going to be and what the scope of it was going to be. And I think with that much time passed, when you kind of go like, yeah, it's just more of the same great stuff, maybe that's just less appealing to people, I guess. Maybe it's just, maybe people have moved on, I guess, by that point. I don't know. I've definitely seen...
Yeah, well, I definitely feel like it is a bit long, you know, for what expectations can be for DLC. And I think even looking back on it, when you were talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, the Doom Eternal DLC is coming up, and like, oh, okay. And like, part 1, did they didn't already do part 1?
Yeah, right.
I was thinking it was going to be part 2. It's like, so yeah, I think it's definitely a fair point.
The other thing is like, this DLC is pretty damn hard, and I think that is a good thing. But even for me, right, who sunk a lot of time into Eternal, I was like, oh yeah, man, I haven't played that game in a while. Like, it's going to be like a baptism by fire kind of going back into that. And so I think in some ways that's probably a little bit of a mental hurdle as well. So, but it's good. I have seen pretty big streamers stream the game, and I feel like it's been getting like, I don't know, a decent amount of love on Twitch. So I hope it's doing well. This game deserves to do well. It deserves to do well. Like the way, think about how mishandled Doom could be right now.
Yeah.
And how much it's not.
Oh, well, I was just thinking about that in terms of like when the reboot of Doom got announced, launching in 2016, sequel coming out now, adding on DLC that's meaningful and well timed, and not like, this is not a game that suffered like crazy delays or weird development mishaps. Like, it's all just gone pretty smoothly and pretty ass kicking for Doom. It's just like, maybe that also might be it. Is it? It's just, you know, the DLC's back and it's here for people that were interested in it, and they'll check it out, and it's great. You know, and sometimes when things kind of like are on course that way, it can not get as much, you know, not make as much noise in a weird way. You know, it's just like you know, the ship is right and it's sailing, and it's a good thing. You know, people can miss that sometimes.
I think that's a good point, Brandon, because I feel like with Eternal, my perception of it is that it hasn't been as broadly received as 2016. Because I think with 2016, you can kind of play it a little bit more like you don't have to think about it too hard, and you can just kind of go in and murder things, and that certainly is appealing. But I think with Eternal, like Eternal pushes back way more aggressively. I've definitely seen people bounce off of that, which is totally understandable. And so I think with Eternal, there's more of a you're either in or you're out kind of vibe. Sure. And so I think like the people that are in know that they're in, and the people that are out know that they're out. But yeah, it's been interesting. I like that a lot. I like when a game finds its audience and manages to cater to them super hard. Like just understanding what you are, I think can oftentimes make for a better product. But right now, we're going to make something on this HOTTAKE. For this HOTTAKE, it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a goofy one. I'm going to call this Frankenstein's Monster.
Ooh. Okay.
And so what we're going to do is I have a series of categories. How many categories do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 8 categories. Okay?
Okay.
And I am going to give you guys 20 points. Okay? You have to split up the 20 points between these 8 categories. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to make a horror game, right? And we're going to have to decide which categories are more important to us than others, because we have a limited amount of points to dump in. So, and you can go up to a maximum of 5, right? So the categories are fear, you know, how much it scares you, how much it really tries to get into your skin. Story, how interesting and well-written the story is. The setting, where it takes place, of course. The game mechanics, how you're playing it moment to moment. The characters, the cast. Music, enemies. Really here I'm focusing on like enemy design. And then replayability is the last category. Is this something that we want to constantly change every time they play? Do we want it to be super linear? That sort of thing.
I'm trying to learn from my favorite horror games, but like they're all 5s across all of those. It's like, damn, all those categories are pretty good.
Right. But just because we like, so if we put 5 points into something, that means it's the best of the best. Like in that category, at least. Right. So if we put 5 points into fear, we're making one of the scariest games ever made, you know, PT levels of fear.
I think I can win. Yeah.
But just because, like, let's say we put a 1 in story, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're making a bad game. It just means that it has a bad story. But there's all of this Frankensteining making sense.
Yeah. So is this just Blood Knight doing this, or are you?
I'll jump in. You know, I'll definitely let you guys take the lead for sure.
Well, I'll go straight for Blood Sweet Spot. We're at least putting 4 into music, right?
4 into music. 4 into 20.
Because here's the thing, you got to offset. It's like if you're trying to make a meal, as little as I know about preparing meals, and you only have so many ingredients, you got to, hopefully one ingredient will maybe make up for something else not being there. I think if we don't invest so much in fear, music will still get us where we want to be, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to think where we can cut corners.
If we put 4 into music, that means we'll have great music, and when people write their reviews of our game, they'll definitely note it and they'll be like, "Yeah, I really enjoyed this," but it won't be the best of the best. It won't be Silent Hill. It'll be like one step below that.
Right. I don't know. This shouts new IP to me, so I'm okay coming out of the gate.
Right.
You know,
okay.
With some memorable stuff. Because that's the other thing too. If you could, if you know you got to cut corners, you can at least get that review where somebody's like, it's a good start.
Yeah,
I can see what they're going for. This might be the type of developer given some more points.
Okay, I like
could
that.
really pull something out next time.
Cutting us some first time slack.
Mechanics is one where I'm maybe wondering if we can limit a little bit.
See, mechanics is probably one that I would dump 4 or 5 into.
Because, I'm trying to think back on games where like I wasn't given necessarily a lot of tools, but it still scared the hell out of me. Like I did, like something like Clock Tower. Like you're really just kind of clicking and hiding. It's really just how the story progresses.
So mechanics is not necessarily complexity. It is just how well it utilizes the tools that it gives you. So like, I think the best Resident Evil games are pretty brilliant mechanically because they really make you think like about every single bullet that you're going to spend. To me, those are strong game mechanics where there's a lot of consequence to what you're doing. And PT, I think, has amazing mechanics, right? And you really just walk
out of the box type stuff.
Yeah. So it's just like if we go ahead.
This is it. I'm literally going to go every category, and Ben's going to be like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, see? I got to push back, though.
I don't know if I'll take your points out of that one. Talk to me, Blood. What are you over the moon about, and what are you not feeling? What categories can we skip?
I feel like I think fear's got to be pretty high. It's got to be a 4 or 5.
Oof.
And I feel like setting should also be pretty high.
Yeah.
But yeah, mechanics I'm definitely willing to give a little bit there for sure.
Well, then you're done. You're out. That's all your points right there. Are those you think the ones you think are most important? We put a 1 in everything else and call it a day, or? Oof. And story. I mean, come on now. Why are you even playing this thing? Why am I even playing a horror game? If I'm not just good story with bad characters, good story. Or sorry, good characters, bad story. You get good characters, bad story. That's Little Hope, and it's the what?
Yeah, I was gonna say good characters, bad story. I think of like Until Dawn, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Or even Resident Evil to some degree.
Yeah, it's the thing. It's like I feel like a lot of the times this actual story in a horror game isn't isn't that great, or you might not even know what happened.
I mean, if
yeah, but you're still
fill in the
terrified.
gaps yourself.
Yeah,
I think story is a really interesting one because, like, I would consider Soma having a great story, Silent Hill 2.
For sure.
Right, I gotta take notes here.
Yeah,
rattle off the categories one more time.
All right, fear.
Okay.
Story. Setting. Mechanics. Characters. Music, enemies, and replayability.
I'm willing to take huge hits on enemies and replayability. Huge hits.
So
yeah,
what I will say.
Do we have to have 1 point in everything, or can some of these be 0?
You have to. Well, I mean, you could. The thing is, if you have like no points in enemies, that means your game doesn't have enemies. So you could construct a game that way. Depends on what you want to do.
No replayability. It's like that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
For no reason.
I think
no matter what, you will not want to come back to this.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about that. Not putting points into anything. Let's say you have to put at least 1 point in every category.
All right.
Sure. And if you put for example, let's say you put 1 point in enemies, people are going to be making fun of how dumb your enemies are. They're going to be like, I played this horror game and it has the goofiest looking enemies ever. Which, hey,
that's
you can go that way.
But that's the thing. Yeah, Blood, do we put all these separate points in different categories to up the fear quotient, or do we just up the fear quotient? It doesn't matter if you got bad enemies. You laugh at the enemies all day. We got 3 points in fear. This game's still getting to you.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. I'm putting 2 points in music. So 8. Okay, so 1, 2. You're saying setting is really important. And 2, 3. Oh boy.
Well, I guess the question is, I mean, do you think we need a 5? Should we have a 5, or should we have?
I think there's no way. I think a 5 is that's where we're really what is it, typecasting ourselves as developers. They're like, I played this game. They're really only good at doing one thing. I got to be honest.
Really?
Yeah.
So no 5.
You could argue that maybe a lot of horror games fall under that.
8. Yeah.
I do think you could, if you're struggling, I definitely think you could start with replayability.
Yeah, well, Brandon, did you already say you're doing a 1 on each of those? So replayability and enemies, you're still batting it around.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, yeah.
So replayability and enemies at 1?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, this will be good. So you've got 2 points.
Okay,
One
I think I got my list.
Okay. Let's see what Blood thinks.
Okay, let's see what you get. Fear 4. Okay, right?
Yep.
Let's ratchet that up. Story 2.
Sure.
Better than 1. It's serviceable. It's there. It gets the job done.
Yeah.
Setting 4.
Okay.
Right? So the fear and setting are kicking. Mechanics 2. Ben convinced me to at least put 1 in mechanics. So it gets the job done. It works. It works. You're picking up items. It's all, it's not, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. 2, again, for characters. It's like, kind of. We could maybe take 1 point out of story and put it into characters if we want. Music 4. So again, like
nice.
The fear, the setting, and the music, like these are the 3 things by the end of that. And then enemies and replayability, yeah, they're not gonna spook you, and you're playing this game once. Sorry.
All right, so hold on. Let me double check.
You only got time to play games once anyway. Let's be honest.
Let me double check that the math is right. So 6, 10, 12, 14, 18, 19. Yep. So it checks out. So Blood, do you agree with Fear 4, Story 2, Setting 4, Mechanics 2, Characters 2, Music 4, Enemies 1, and Replayability 1? Do you feel good about that?
I know Brandon's going to think this is crazy, but I might shift 1 point. I might take Music to a 3. Because it's still better than average, right?
Sure.
And do 2 on enemies.
Ooh, okay.
I actually think that's really smart. Yeah.
I think that's a good play.
Okay.
A little nervous about the story and characters being pretty basic, but whatever.
So now, you don't have to go crazy with it, but I want you to try to tell me the game that you're making, which has Fear at 4, so great scares, really gets under people's skin. Maybe not the scariest thing that they've ever played, but they were looking for fears and they got them. Story 2, people don't outright hate it, but they struggle to remember what even happened with the story. They just don't care. They just don't care about it. Setting 4, they love where this takes place. Really cool setting. Again, maybe not the best they've ever seen, maybe not the most unique, but what it uses well. Mechanics 2, the game works, doesn't actively get in their way. They're not really about playing it. That's not the most exciting thing to them. It's the setting and how it scares them, not what they're actually doing with a controller or keyboard and mouse. Characters 2, again, like the story, not offensive, but just there, not really interesting. People aren't looking up these people on wikis. Music 3, good music. Couple of tunes got in their head, but a lot of other music just kind of blended together. Enemies 2, not outright embarrassing, but this is a game that maybe benefits by having its enemies in the shadows, because when you get a good look at them in the light, maybe not so intimidating. Kind of forgettable enemies. Replayability 1, you're only playing this game one time, that's it. Maybe even not once. Replayability. So what are we making? Describe it to me. And I think the things that I want you to focus on are your highest categories. So how is it scaring you, and where is it taking place?
Setting. You're probably, this is like Blair Witch, man. You are in a forest you cannot escape. You are.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. I was thinking
unrelenting. There's no safe rooms in this game, man. You are just constantly.
So what's
kind of like Outlast, just derelict everything.
What's preventing you from escaping? Because it's definitely not the enemies.
Well, there's it's.
But I think it could be, because you're being hunted, so the enemies are just some dudes. you know?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
okay. I see where you're
that's why the enemies suck, is because it's like there's a presence. You know what I mean? Like there's voices. There's visually. There's just a lot of atmospheric stuff happening. It never materializes in anything you can target or interact with. But you feel it when you're there like the whole time. So there's a lot of stuff going on in your head. A lot of like imagery that's messing with you. And yeah, just creepy music. So there's just a lot of, again, the trying to think. Be fun if there's like ways that the environment is factoring into the music as well. Just kind of the general sound design. Sound design's not on here. I'm kind of lumping that into setting and music.
Yeah.
I feel like Brandon, this should.
I was lumping that into fear as well.
Yeah.
Sound design. Yeah.
I feel like this should be like on a mountain, right? And so because when you have like these steep slopes and things, you can be getting chased, and then you just come up to like a waterfall and like, do I jump?
Yeah.
Do I let them catch up to me? And similarly, like there can be places where you think you're on solid footing and you just scramble and you just get knocked down a few hundred feet or something, and
yes, blood.
You can have caves. You can come across like a bear or a wolf or something that's comes out of nowhere, and I also think
a very basic looking bear, but still, yes.
Yeah, but I also think that like there'd be a good situation to have traps. I think traps would be a really fun element to mess with your mind. To like you think that you're gonna get some resources, and you stick your hand in there, and your hand gets stuck, and like now what do I do? And something's knows that you got caught in that trap, and you've got a limited time to figure out how to get yourself free and get out of there before you get hunted down.
Blood, I really like the direction that you're taking this game. You mentioned so bears and wolves and cliffs and traps, all good elements. But you also mentioned there being like humans that were maybe residing on this mountain, right? Like some sort of threat from some sort of group. What kind of group are we talking about here? Are we talking about like escaped murderers or a cult or...
Well, here's the thing, Ben. Our story and our characters both suck.
Right.
So there's just some guys with beards, and you just don't know.
Okay, fair
you
point.
You really have no
fair
idea
point.
who these guys are.
Yeah. And do you just never find out? Really?
Yeah, locals.
Okay. Locals. That's the best you get.
You get some stories that kind of talk about some vague thing, like somebody got killed over here or whatever, but then it never really connects to anything.
What is the Metacritic average for this game? I have a score in mind, if you're curious.
83.
Okay. I was saying 8-1.
I was going to say 79.
79?
Not quite an 80, but close. But we're all in the same range, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Can you give me a title for this game? With everything that you've said so far.
Cold Wind.
All right. That's good.
Cold Wind doesn't even sound like a horror game.
I know. Well, I don't know how many points can we put into title. I can't tell. Would that be story? I guess.
All right. I guess we'll go with Cold Wind.
Cold Wind.
Or well, we're okay. So we have a bad story.
Doesn't mean you have a bad title, though.
And we're on a mountain.
Oh, okay. We got
No.
Maybe
5
this one I'm giving you for free.
Something that doesn't make sense. I don't know. I was like thinking like Shiver Me Timbers would be like really stupid title.
Yeah.
I think if you go with Shiver Me Timbers, that Metacritic score is plummeting. Like, it's not the 80s. It's Shiver Me Timbers. Like, go ahead.
Has there been a game called like Shiver or like The Shiver?
I'm sure there has.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sure there has.
Too.
But
it's better than Cold Wind.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm satisfied with that title. We can go with Cold Wind / Shiver.
Yeah. This is subtitle. Cold Wind Shiver.
Cold Wind.
Have you played Cold Wind Shiver?
Have you played Cold Wind Shiver? Are we ready for some emails?
Yeah.
That was fun. Thank you for indulging my dumb little game.
That was not my least favorite soundtrack of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I thought so too.
It was okay.
Excited to see their next game.
Let's just keep the games rolling. We've got a game coming in from Samuel. Frame Trap Game Submission, Smash Hits. Hello, allies. Playing as Steve in Super Smash Bros. This month has been an almost surreal experience for me, even though I don't have a particular attachment to Minecraft. It really hit home how special this crossover is as a celebration of gaming, but also got me thinking about how Smash itself has become such a juggernaut in its own right, with Ultimate selling 19.99 million units, making it much bigger than many of the games it represents. The game I put together is called Smash Hits. For each series listed, the allies must say hit if any single game in that series has sold more than Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and smash if not. So hit and it's any single game in the series, not the series itself. And smash if not. I use the video game sales wiki. Switch game numbers are as of June 2020. I also list the series bestseller with each answer. All right, so The Legend of Zelda, hit or smash?
Hit. It could be a trick question, but I would say hit.
I'll say hit.
Not many.
Hit.
Yeah, I think Breath of the Wild is the one that.
Correct. Blood is correct. Breath of the Wild, 20.2 million units, includes Wii U. There. 3D Super Mario games, hit or smash?
Hit for sure.
Smash.
Ooh.
Blood is on a roll. Smash. Super Mario Odyssey is the highest one, 18.1 million.
Oh. Wow.
This one's a tricky one. Duck Hunt, hit or smash?
That is a tricky one.
Because it was packed in, wasn't it? Yeah, I'll go hit.
Sure, I'll say hit.
That's a hit. You're both right. Duck Hunt NES, 28.3 million. Sonic, hit or smash? Any single Sonic game sold more than smash. Brand's going smash.
I'll say smash.
Both wrong. Hit. Sonic the Hedgehog, 24 million. According to this email. Final Fantasy, hit or smash?
Oh, hit for sure.
Hit.
Smash. Final Fantasy 7, 18.2 million.
Oh, man.
So close.
Wow.
A lot of these are really close.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Donkey Kong. Hit.
Smash.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Smash, yeah.
Also smash.
You're both right. Donkey Kong Country is a smash, 13 million.
Okay.
He has a bonus round here, which I think adds an interesting twist on this. So now you say hit or smash if the entire series has sold more than Smash Ultimate, and smash if not. Metroid.
Smash.
Smash.
Correct. 18.2 million, which is...
Wait, are we comparing it only to Ultimate or all of Smash Brothers?
All of Metroid to Smash.
All of Metroid to Smash Ultimate specifically.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
But yes, you're right. It's Smash, which is a shame. 18.2 million. Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem.
Smash.
I gotta say hit.
Smash, 15.1 million.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know if that is just North America or not.
Yeah, I don't either. That's why I was thinking, because there's a lot of games that came out before, and it's been rising in popularity.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Fire Emblem Smash, 15.1 million. This one is tricky. So Game & Watch includes Game & Watch hardware.
Oh, gosh. I'll say Smash, but I really have no idea.
I'll go hit because I love Game & Watch.
Hit, 43.4 million, according to this email.
43?
Yeah, that's
huge.
Yeah. That one's weird. Okay.
Lots of different Game & Watches.
Persona.
For sure, that's true.
This would definitely depend on international
Smash.
versus US. Smasher, I think.
Did you both say Smash?
Yeah.
Okay. Smash is correct. It's 13 million. Yoshi, Brandon's favorite.
Yay! A hit because I love him.
This is all
get him to bite
Yoshi.
stuff.
So many little spins.
Right, it's weird.
Hit Yoshi in the back of the head.
Poor Yoshi, dude.
I'll go Smash. I'm a little skeptical.
Hit, 20.4 million. Probably Smash when we get our next sales update.
Oh, nice.
Just barely. Okay.
Metal Gear Solid.
Hit. Come on now.
Hit.
Yeah, hit 30 million. Correct. Both
Okay.
right. A really cool game. I like that. Thanks, Samuel.
Yeah, that was fun.
Hold on one second. All right, our next email comes in from James. Hello, Ben and panel. It's not really a secret to those that follow the game industry that modern games will often collect lots of data about player behavior for analysis. This data is then used for charts and such to inform decisions regarding updates to existing games as well as future projects. This practice is most commonly associated with multiplayer games, but with how commonplace it is for people to be connected to the internet even when playing alone, there's a significant number of single-player games that will also be doing it. At the very minimum,
heat maps.
Yeah, at the very minimum, developers will generally be aware of, achievement trophy percentages. My question to the panel is, do you think knowing this has ever subconsciously or consciously, I guess, had any influence on anything you do in a game? Knowing that even if you're just a single anonymous data point, that you may be looked at to shape decisions made by the developer. It's obviously a minor, subtle thing, but I find it an interesting thing to think about.
I'd be really curious what some developer thinks of Damiani's data.
Why do you say that?
They just said puzzled.
just going up against walls and breaking things.
Sure.
And, yeah.
We see. This one guy played snipper clips, and the solution was right in front of him, but he just kept
spinning.
He kept trying to lift the other character. I love this.
I'm definitely. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I love it. Because this is us at preview events too. Like I've had this happen many times in real time where, somebody comes over and like, are you having a problem? And I'm just like, what is this? I don't understand. I'm stuck here. And they're like, oh, well, here's this easy solution you're completely missing because it's the first time you've ever played this game. And I'm like, oh, got it.
There's definitely that sort of foreignness that sort of breaks in when you're at a preview event.
Yes.
You feel
definitely.
like you're even when you're doing these at-home previews, there's something about that time limit that like adds the stress to you. And then like, I gotta get through this whole thing, that your brain just starts to miss like just little nuances and little bits of information. It's like there's a thing on the screen telling you to do this.
Yeah.
You missed it.
When I did,
it's similar to streaming. Yeah.
When I did the Cyberpunk preview, like there was somebody with me the whole time, and so I was like, it's just me and this person, and they're just paying attention to what I'm doing, because like normally at preview events they have to like kind of monitor a group of people, and so you definitely get that feeling creeping in. But when it's just you and one other person, you're like, boy, I hope I don't do anything stupid in this game I haven't played before. Yeah.
They're just judging you. They're like, that gun,
I guess that's what you did, huh? Yeah.
Great.
But in terms of like the data collection and the idea that like my movements and interactions are being recorded when I'm just playing a game on my own, like I don't think about it or consider it whatsoever. I'm definitely, I definitely have my own quirks. I'm definitely a slower, thorough person, and sometimes I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand how my time to complete a game ends up being so much higher than everybody else's.
Right.
Especially with Huber, with like when he got through The Witcher 3 and like he's like, yeah, I did all the side quests and all the points of interest, and I was under 100 hours, and I'm like, what? How? It's one thing if you tell me you skipped over some things, but when you say you did everything and you still got through it in like a lot less time than him, they're like, what am I doing different?
You're very thorough.
But yeah.
I've cut many a Bloodworth reviews. You're a very thorough player.
I would agree with you though, Blood. Like I think in terms of like developers getting data from how I'm playing, it's something that I don't think about until I'm made aware of it, until they're like, if they happen to show that data somehow, but otherwise it fades in the background to me. It's definitely an interesting thing to consider, but not one that is I'm actively thinking about as I'm going through a game if I'm just in my own home. How about you, Brandon?
Agreed. I don't. I'm weird. I never want to like influence my opinions on privacy, like on other people's opinions, because that can be obviously a very private matter. But I'm like, it takes a lot for me to get spooked out about those things.
Sure.
I love when people are looking at you through your webcams. I'm like, well, they're probably pretty bored. I don't know. Like I'm recording my webcam right now, like just so much of what we do is public. And like I was saying, so many, there are so many instances where it's like, I hope people are listening. I hope, Crystal Dynamics is listening every time I talk about Avengers, because I have notes, so like, I hope somebody out there is copying that stuff. I remember the first time I heard about this, I think it was Half-Life 2 episode 1. that they were talking about like actively charting specifically the out, like the moment people stopped playing. They were like, whoa, and noticing these little hiccups. So they were like, whoa, they are all stopping right here. And like, what is it? What did we put there? That's just such an easy. I like the way you put it, Ben, when you say people bounce off of stuff. I like that idea of all of us. I like this concept of all of us just like bubbles, like going through the creative, metaverse, just kind of like looking for happiness, just like how long can we stick onto something before we're just, tossed to the other side of the court.
Yeah, it's funny, and I imagine it's hard for the developers because, like, you look at trophies for things, and it's like, well, a lot of people just don't finish games no matter what, and so, like, I can imagine that you have like different subsets of categories where it's like, okay, what type of player are they? Do they normally finish games? And like that data that you're collecting. And then it's like, well, where do the people struggle that stuck all the way through? And I can imagine it can get like very subcategory-esque as you're
you look at ones and zeros aren't really going to tell you a whole lot at the end of the day, because like if you dive into my profile currently on PlayStation, you will see that I have started and not finished Ghost of Tsushima, and that has absolutely nothing to do based on my interests or whether that game is good or not. Like that game is great and I love it, and I'm probably not going to get back to it until late December just because of life, so it's I think that stuff will only tell you too much. It really is when you look at like a million or a billion points of data, then it's like, okay, and then I'm looking at all these little tiny dots being one dot in there, like it's fine.
Our last email comes in from Martian. Hey, hi Ben and allies. I just saw Huber's tweet on the Yakuza / Streets of Rage crossover, and now we know he not only has the power to will remakes and sequels into existence, but also crossover games. After seeing Streets of Kamurocho, I had the idea for a question. Which modern-day game or franchise would you like to see cross over with a 16-bit classic? As an example, my pick would be Bloodborne crossed with Super Castlevania 4. I think it would make for an amazing game. Thanks for everything, and stay positive.
But I think I think to stay in the spirit, it would probably be that direction, right? Like you would make a retro version of it, sort of like Yarntown.
The Mandalorian Super Star Wars.
Nice.
16-bit, like that Star Wars style, but it's the show. You're going through Mandalorian, blowing up dudes.
So, sorry, it would be like Super Sar Wars, but Mandalorian. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
No. So they would do the music. It would be that, like the actual like Mandalorian theme, and like that'd be fun.
I actually don't know if I have an answer for this. It's difficult.
Bloodborne and Super Castlevania 4 hit real hard for me. Ooh.
Right. Yeah, that's
even
a good
just
one.
The score too, because the score to Super Castlevania 4 is so dope. But to hear that, have you seen the guy doing funk to Bloodborne on his bass? Some guy on Twitter is just like, he's just dropping like the crazy bass line on top of like all these Bloodborne tracks.
I think it would be interesting to have like The Witcher as like a 90s Infinity Engine isometric RPG, just that style.
Sure.
And like when you talk to somebody, they have character.
I mean, the original game sort of started as something similar to that.
What?
But yeah.
But it wasn't like you.
Yeah, it wasn't top down. Yeah. It was still 3D. Yeah. But I just mean like in terms of gameplay, it was a little bit more removed in that sense.
Okay. So maybe that's not the best pick.
Trying to think about stuff that's like really new.
Yeah, this is harder for me than I would think it would be.
Really like the Lost Vikings. I'm trying to think if anything can 3 characters that you can take from popular media or something and merge them with that concept.
You mentioned Mandalorian, and I'm just thinking like TV shows that would be cool to
right
do this with. Yeah, I wish I had like a banging answer.
Through our reviews to try to find a good one.
Yeah. Alien 3 is another great licensed game from Super Nintendo that I enjoy. That I'm like, Blade Runner could fit that aesthetic, and maybe other things. Judge Dredd could be a fun game with the model.
Fitting our themes for this month. Luigi's Mansion, Zombies Ate My Neighbors.
I looked that up when we had our horror stream coming up. I was like, is Zombies Ate My Neighbors on like PC or something weird? Like, can we get it? Is it like on GOG or something? No.
Yeah, it's
a lot of weird knockoffs.
In some ways, like I'm not really that into like its gameplay.
Sure,
that's its level structure and stuff. But yeah, just again, like having something that kind of puts those two things together, like having a 2D top-down Luigi's Mansion game.
I think Zombies
like
Put My Neighbors clearly put 3 points into enemies, music, and mechanics. And settings. The settings were good too. Fear? No. Story? No.
No, yeah, it's definitely not a fear game.
Brendan, when you were kind of just listing off stuff, I want a really, really, really good... I know we just got a recent one, but it was multiplayer. I want a really good Predator single-player game. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Like a modern one is what I'm saying. One on current hardware. Yeah. All right. I think that's going to do it for Frame Trap. Thank you so much to my panelists, Brandon Jones and Daniel Bloodworth. If you would like to write into Frame Trap, the email address is askeasyallies@gmail.com. One more time, that is askeasyallies@gmail.com. It is also in the description of the YouTube video. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.